What character would realistically learn magic in Marvel? This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 1, Breaking the Boundary. At 9 o'clock, accompanied by a flash of blue light, Shenyan returned to the door of his temporary residence. He stood in front of the door, moved his fingers slightly, and the door creaked open by itself. The man put on slippers as usual and walked to the living room. He found a man standing in his living room with his back to him, his cloak fluttering. "Why am I not surprised at all, Strange?" Shenyan didn't even look at him, and went to the kitchen to open the refrigerator and get himself a can of Coca-Cola. "It's not too late to give up now." The man called Strange turned around. He was wearing a close-fitting robe and a red high-collared cloak. The whole person was actually floating in the air. "What do you mean?" Shenyan laughed. He walked to the living room, moved his fingers slightly, and another can of Coca-Cola flew out of the refrigerator and flew straight to Strange. Outside the French window, the bustling night scene of New York witnessed this scene. There was a lot of traffic outside, so lively. Strange raised his hand and took the flying Coke, but did not drink it. He fell to the ground, his face complicated, his eyes pleading. "I know what you want to do, but it's impossible to succeed. You are widely respected here. Why do you have to leave?" Shenyan shook his head. He sat there quietly, drinking Coke from mouth to mouth. There was a vague sound outside the window. The high-rise apartments in downtown New York enjoy the best views the city can see. This also means that people who live here are usually very lonely. You can see the hustle and bustle of traffic and the bright lights, but you can't hear their specific voices. It's like being isolated from the world. "How many times have I saved this world, Strange?" Shenyan suddenly asked. "I can't remember," the current Supreme Sorcerer replied. "Yes, you can't remember, and I can't remember what my hometown looks like." Strange pursed his lips. He sat on the sofa on the other side, and asked, "Can't this be your home? You know the answer." Shenyan smiled again. "Let's get down to business. What do you want to do?" "I want to persuade you to stop." Strange gritted his teeth, and was actually a little embarrassed to bring up this matter. Shenyan didn't answer him, which made him feel depressed. After a few seconds, he raised his hand, and the simple pendant on his chest turned, and a bright green light burst out from it. "I've seen it." The man who entered Camartage before him and was more like his teacher than Ancient One raised his head, and there was a hint of disappointment in his eyes that he couldn't understand. He heard Shenyan say, "What you see are just possibilities, Strange. I told you a long time ago that the Eye of Agamotto can only forget it. How many possibilities have you seen?" 10,000 kinds, Strange said. "There are many more that I haven't had time to see." 10,000 kinds. Shenyan stood up and walked to the French window. He turned his back to Strange and spoke slowly. "At every moment, different branches will be born in the future. We have studied topics related to prophecy and the future. Do you remember the conclusion we came to in the end?" "I remember." "What conclusion did we come to?" "They are all bullshit." Shenyan laughed. "Yes, they are all bullshit. So, even if you see 10,000 possibilities of my failure, I still firmly believe that among those countless failures, I will succeed once. I only need this one time, and that's enough." "You are far better than me." Strange closed his eyes and talked about a topic that had nothing to do with what they were talking about in a tone that was almost a sigh. "I don't understand why the Ancient One would let me succeed as the Sorcerer Supreme, and I don't understand why you would accept this. It was you who exterminated those Skrulls, and it was you who killed Thanos with your own hands. Why do you have to leave, even at the cost of your life?" "Because I have to try." Shenyan turned his head abruptly, his black hair fluttering, and dark magical fluorescence lit up from his eyes. "I have to do this. Everything I have done in the past 10 years is just a byproduct of it. I once turned to science, but science couldn't help, so I turned to magic. I spent 10 years becoming the strongest and mastered every kind of magic. I even got those dimensional demons out of our world, so that magic power could truly be owned by us, and using spells no longer required the so-called price. But this can't cover up my deep desire, Strange. There is no second choice between this desire and my life. Yes, I know that according to the existing theory, there are many different worlds out there, and I may not be able to find the one I belong to in 10,000 years. But I don't care, I have to try. Strange knew that he couldn't convince Shenyan, so he began to discuss the feasibility of this matter in a practical way. If you want to break through the boundary and leave according to the theories left by those madmen in history, then how do you deal with the gaze of the gods outside the domain? Shenyan laughed again. He finally talked about this matter. The creatures floating outside the world barrier of the gods outside the domain are called gods, but they are completely unable to communicate or even look directly at each other. No one knows their intentions, and no one has a good ending after contacting them. Not only that, in the long history of this world, there have been 2 cases where the world barrier was broken. These 2 events caused the deaths of countless people, and also brought vampires, werewolves and various dark monsters to this world. Some people say that their gaze, even just a curious glance, will cause the world to fall apart. I don't want to teach you now, you have already graduated, so I'll make it short. Strange. Looking through all the spell books in the world, you will only find one spell about traveling through the world. Madman, Vifan. Strange said in a deep voice. The infamous madman Vifan Dukovic, the founder of the current theory of breaking the world, and the discoverer of the world barrier. The name is very loud, but he does not have a good reputation in the history of wizards. The spell he invented has no name, and it is even said to come from one of his dreams. Vifan believes that in addition to the world under our feet, there should be countless magnificent worlds waiting for human exploration. He was the strongest wizard of that era. He considered himself a pioneer of mankind. He spent 30 years studying the method of breaking the world. When he was 178 years old, he succeeded. Vifan relied on a so-called dream to study the complete spell of breaking the world. Not only that, he even found the weakest point of the world barrier. Next, he spent 40 years killing a demon king of hell and imprisoned the latter's soul. Then, he summoned a cherubim from heaven at the weakest point of the world barrier. Then, he killed the cherubim and mixed their souls, plus his own magic power. The 3 opposing forces burst out unimaginable energy as soon as they came into contact. At the end of his life, Vifan should have been smiling. He succeeded, but he also died. From beginning to end, he never thought about how he could survive such an explosion, and then the consequences came. The Busterville incident. When the explosion occurred, only 3 of the 70 wizards who were traveling with him died on the spot. At the same time, above the transparent sky, a flesh and blood aggregate appeared, but no one knew. 3 days later, it had devoured half of the Earth's creatures. When it was destroyed, it was 300 meters tall, and the pollution on its body was so strong that ordinary mages would be directly contaminated and become part of its rotten flesh and blood. Only those with high magic power could barely resist it when wearing spiritual protection instruments. The mages called on angels, but the angels refused. They turned to use sacrifices to summon demons, but the demons also refused and even claimed that the earth was about to be destroyed. But the Ancient One finally solved it. Vifan is very good, but he is still bound by the times. In his time, spells such as portals were not even discovered. We stand on his shoulders and should do better than him. In fact, I think I can improve it. Strange smiled bitterly. Yes, of course you can. He would not deny this, and no one could deny Shenyan's talent in magic. He improved countless theories and finally summed up a set of spellcasting methods that relied on mental distortion of reality and assisted by magic. The difficulty has increased, but the power and efficiency are 5 times faster. In the magic world, it is said that any wizard should thank him. Strange has no objection to this, and he is also one of the beneficiaries. What do you want to do? He asked. Shenyan smiled slightly. Come with me. He snapped his fingers, and the black magic gathered between them, and the portal appeared in an instant. As soon as he said it, the man snapped his fingers. The black magic gathered between his fingers and opened a portal. Behind the door was his laboratory, which was messy, but showed a strange order. Strange followed him in, and a familiar smell of potion immediately shocked his mind. He knew that this special fragrance was a potion called sober. It can keep people rational and clear-headed, and the effect is the same as its name. The only disadvantage is that the production process and raw materials are not very beautiful. However, all potions are like this. Shenyan put his hands behind his back and walked to the middle of the laboratory. The casual clothes on his body turned into a simple black robe in an instant, and the corners of his clothes moved without wind. The flickering light blue magic fluorescence appeared in an instant, and the results of various complex inferences and data calculations were presented in front of Strange. "How is it, my research results?" Shenyan smiled slightly. "You can study for a while to catch up with my progress. After reading these, you should have more confidence in me." Strange sighed helplessly, but laughed abruptly a few seconds later. "Using me as a laborer, like before? You followed in by yourself, Strange. I never forced you." "Yes." The current Supreme Sorcerer rolled his eyes. "You really didn't, but you always threw these data directly in my face. How can I refuse after seeing these things?" "If you refuse, you are not a wizard." Shenyan laughed. "Let's start, Strange. Let's surpass this era for once." Written at the beginning. If later readers find that the comments and chapter contents are not consistent, this is normal, because the author wrote this book with a playful mentality at the beginning. Many places are fabricated. However, as I wrote, I found that the income was not bad, and I really enjoyed writing. A reader suggested that I rewrite the previous part that was not good, and I thought he had some truth. So I did it. For now, this work is still in progress. Chapter 2. There is only a fine line between genius and madness. Although he would not say it explicitly, Strange did have a bad premonition about the future. Every time he was pulled to Shenyan's laboratory, he would be forced to work overtime for a long time, and now, this premonition has come true. To date, he has been in the laboratory for 3 weeks, and the whole person seems a little confused. Shenyan is still in high spirits. This is the benefit of handing over the complex calculation work to others. He is only responsible for theory and raising questions. Strange did raise objections, but was pushed back by one sentence. "I can calculate the data, but can you propose the theory of research and our next direction?" Strange yawned, put his hands together, and waved them violently. The calculation formulas and conjectures that filled the air disappeared. 3 weeks of derivation have gained a lot. At least they have figured out one thing. If they continue according to Vifan's ideas, I am afraid there will be no future. Not only that, it will even bring another big disaster to the world. Although they have many superheroes who can help this time, it is better not to die if no one can. In Vifan's imagination, his method of breaking the world is to blow up the world barrier, and then jump out immediately before the gods of the outer domain notice it, just like a cat stealing cookies when its owner is not paying attention. His ideas are crude but very imaginative, and his action is as terrible as a cat. He did not discuss with anyone, and blew up the raw materials directly after getting them, and killed himself in the process. There are very big problems with his doing this. First, according to existing research, the world barrier is difficult to repair. After all, the cookies eaten by cats will not come back by themselves. Second, if there is no world barrier to block it, the gods of the outer domain can easily find that there is a world with a broken world barrier. At that time, no matter whether they have malicious intentions or not, they will probably come over curiously to take a look, just like humans watching the excitement. Shenyan does not want to cause the destruction of the world because of his own reasons. He wants to make an attempt to let go completely, but he is not so crazy as to drag the whole world as a price. In the final analysis, as a human, you still have to have some principles. Otherwise, even if he succeeded in returning, how would he face the people in that world? Let's get back to the point. Although Vifan failed, his failure was also valuable. He proved at least one thing: the world barrier can be destroyed. It is not indestructible. This also means that it can be changed. The research and practice direction of the two began from then on. 700 years ago, an unknown successor of Vifan invented a spell with his life's energy, the Eye of Observation. It has only one effect: search and observe the weak point of the world barrier closest to the caster. Shenyan closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, there were already stars in his eyes. His eyes penetrated everything and reached Antarctica. If the world barrier had consciousness, it would scream and slap Shenyan now. His eyes were somewhat rogue. 5 minutes later, he found the weakest point of the world barrier at this point in time, Antarctica. He turned his head and nodded slightly to Strange, who quickly opened the portal. Behind the portal was a pale land covered with ice and snow. The two stepped through the portal and stood in the snow in thin clothes. They looked at each other and saw the excitement in each other's eyes. Strange had even completely forgotten that he wanted to stop him. Then, according to our theory, Shenyan opened his hands, put his index finger and middle finger together, and tapped his temple. The powerful magic flashed and disappeared. He just pulled out half of his soul. The light blue illusory shadow swayed slightly in the snow, revealing an illusory beauty. With a sense of expectation of witnessing, Strange stared at the man standing in front of him with admiration. The man with a weak face and a distorted face due to the pain of the split soul. "You are really a lunatic." "I never said I wasn't," Shenyan responded with a smile, "but I am more of a wizard." "We should always remain curious and enterprising, right?" In the snowstorm of Antarctica, he raised his hand without hesitation. A flash of light appeared, and Strange knew what he had done. He had integrated half of his soul into the world barrier. The wisdom of countless predecessors and their inferences together created this crazy method. In the 6th century AD, the madman Vaifandakavik died. The only 3 remaining wizards of the 70 who traveled with him divided his research results into 3 parts and sealed them in their own tombs after solving the flesh pollution. In the 13th century AD, an unknown wizard from India concluded through calculation that the world barrier could protect the intelligent creatures in the universe from the gaze of the gods outside the domain, and proved this. In the 17th century AD, Isaac Newton left the last stack of manuscripts before his death. In the manuscript, he raised a question as an alchemist. As a wizard, he inevitably thought of Vaifandakavik at the last moment of his life and also embarked on this research path. From ancient times to the present, countless wizards have fallen on this road one after another, without regrets. No one asked whether it was worth it, no one knew whether it would succeed, and no one knew whether what they did was right. But why not give it a try? Humans are such creatures. In the next second, Strange almost cried for what happened. He did not cancel the lookout eye. In his perspective, his brother's body standing in the same place was the same color as the world barrier. Nothingness, but transparent white. He fell to the ground due to excessive excitement. Strange raised his hand and pointed at Shenyan, almost unable to speak, and could only spit out broken words. Shenyan still stood. A strong impulse surged in his heart, surging non-stop, close to instinct, close to intuition. He realized that I might have lived for this moment in the past 10 years. Then, he smiled. That smile was just like a child. "We succeeded, Strange." This was the last sentence he left to the world. When he opened his eyes again, he had come to a strange place. Countless glass-like objects wrapped around the rotating nebula. He stared at them obsessively and trembled deeply. Apart from these, there were also some huge black shadows lurking in the sea of stars, existing silently and lonely, just existing, motionless, wandering. Only this word can describe his current behavior, and the smile on Shenyan's face never stopped. He succeeded. Standing on the shoulders and experience of countless people, he and Strange succeeded. He left the last precious wealth to that world, and he himself was about to get what he wanted. However, before this moment, he actually didn't know whether he would die at the moment of passing through the world barrier, and he didn't know whether the outside world was really full of other worlds as the predecessors had speculated. He just couldn't wait any longer. Rather than doing nothing, he would rather die on the way home. God knows how long he has been suppressed. He came to this strange world alone for 10 years, and was alone from the age of 20 to 30. He has been thinking about this matter all the time. There are no superheroes in that world, and there is no so-called magic, but there is a home in that world, a home that he is at least familiar with, not a place that seems to be, not a place where even the Jade Emperor in mythology wears Western armor, although he never really admitted it. Shenyan thought that he did miss his hometown. However, after a brief excitement, he couldn't help but be a little dazed. He succeeded, yes, But what about after that? Shenyan suddenly realized that he didn't calculate what to do after success. A bitter smile bloomed on his face. Is this the disadvantage of risking one's life? At the same time, a feeling of fatigue arose from the bottom of his heart, and that intuition appeared again and whispered in his heart in a way that humans cannot understand yet. The solitary mage raised his head in silence, and a world wrapped in transparent material slowly rotated above his head. Inside it, a similar blue planet was rotating, a short resting place. Without hesitation, he entered it. Chapter 3. This kind of thing must be made public. 1 month later. To be honest, I'm a little disappointed. Shenyan turned his back to the guy lying on the platform, who was tied up tightly with black magic chains, and drank a cup of coffee in his hand. He was dressed casually, but his expression was not very good. You attacked me without authorization and showed strong malice. Although I understand that people like you can do all kinds of despicable things, including killing a person you think is a muggle for no reason. Unfortunately, I am not. But what I can't understand is the way you cast spells. Sir, you have treasures, but you never thought of digging it. He put down the coffee, turned around, took a stick from the guy's waist, and shook it in his hand. Poor quality enchanted wand. You have obviously touched the boundary of using the mind to distort reality. But why did you stop? Alas. He sighed for a long time, and the guy looked at him in horror, whimpering non-stop, as if begging for mercy. He didn't listen to what he said at all. What a pity. Shenyan took a last closer look as the wand in his hand, shook his head, and threw it away. He raised his right index finger, and a thin layer of magic blade emerged. He walked towards the poor local wizard, and even smiled gently when he noticed his sweaty and terrified expression. Relax, sir. With the experience of your previous companions, I will be very careful this time. You won't die, at least not in such a painful way. The guy struggled violently. Don't try to beg for mercy. Just accept this fact. You blocked me in the back alley of the magic item trading market with the intention of killing me. The wizard smiled gently. Everything has its cause. Sir, you are an adult. You should be responsible for your actions, right? Half an hour later, he wiped the blood on his hands, walked out of the basement, and snapped his fingers to clean up the mess inside with magic. Then, he came to the yard of this country villa where he had lived for a month and sat down. The scenery in the countryside of Europe is very nice. It is not an exaggeration to say that it is a picturesque place. In such an environment, Shenyan began to think silently. Thanks to the kind people who came to his door, he finally figured out the magic methods of the wizards in this world. He has been here for a month and planned to leave immediately, but he found that the magic power in this world is extremely strong and there are spellcasters. With the mind of a researcher, he plans to stay for a while and collect some magic-related information. However, as a foreigner, he did not come into contact with the magic world here. At most, he went to the place where they traded items privately to increase his knowledge of the other world and quietly scanned the books in those bookstores through his mental power. He could not refuse such a thing. Then, the good times did not last long. After a gathering, these people targeted him. They thought he was a stranger who was easy to bully, a muggle who had sneaked into the wizard gathering by chance, and wanted to kill him for this. They seemed to hate muggles, that is, ordinary people. This is very interesting. However, their poor knowledge could not support their stupid brains to understand that it was not that the magic power did not exist in this stranger in the black robe, but that the magic power was completely restrained. This was the proof that he had a very high control over his magic power. However, although they had changed to a different world, and the people here called themselves wizards instead of mage, their body structure was no different from what Shenyan knew, and even the place where the magic power was stored had not changed. It was still in the brain. Thinking of this, he sighed again. How could he just stop like this? Why do you have to rely on the magic wand and spells? You could have gone further. What a pity. The mind distorts reality, and the will forces it to follow its own orders. Isn't this a better way than casting spells with a magic wand? He shook his head helplessly, regretful, and couldn't stop the birth of this emotion at all. At the beginning, the essence of the spells he learned from Ancient One was borrowing. The mages cooperated with each other through complex gestures and spell syllables. and obtained magic power and completed spells by sacrificing to the dimensional demon god. As a person from another world, Shenyan soon discovered something was wrong. How could he be called a mage if he didn't even have magic power? So he began to make bold changes. He even succeeded, and no one expected him to succeed. After his improvements, the way of casting spells used by confronts mages is very different from before. Now, they no longer need to borrow and pay a painful price. They only need to generate magic power through meditation and use their mental power to drive the operation of magic power. Fireball is still fireball, and even the formation has not changed, but there is no need to communicate with the dimensional demon god anymore. What else to communicate? The creditor has become myself. However, despite this, the way to obtain magic power, that is, the process of meditation, is extremely dangerous. Without long-term practice or amazing talent, any step can cause serious consequences. At the least, you will become an idiot, and at the worst, you will die on the spot. Even so, it can't stop mages from all over the world from coming to confronts to learn one by one. No mage can refuse this. The great power belongs to oneself. As his attainments in magic became higher and higher, Shenyan did not stop there. He began to constantly improve and invent new spells. In the process, he even gradually discovered the essence of magic. Magic, in the final analysis, is actually to use a strong will to influence, distort, and even change the world, make the world surrender to you. This is also the fundamental reason why he is disappointed with the wizards in this world. They have walked the path of confronts wizards for thousands of years, but suddenly stopped. They can obviously take a step forward, a step further, just a small step, but no one took it. The wizards in this world are all children who have just learned to run. They all have talents, and the best of them may even have powerful magic. Unfortunately, this talent was wasted, completely wasted. They could have become professional runners when they grew up, and those with superior talents could even become bolt, running to shock everyone and become the synonym of greatness. But now Shenyan raised his head and looked at the clear sky in the European countryside, and couldn't help but hesitate. Do I really want to do this? Do I really want to help them improve and forcefully change the course of this world as an outsider? They are content with the status quo. Although I am angry at their lack of struggle, this anger is unreasonable. He closed his eyes and planned to rest for a while and let go of this meaningless obsession, but a voice sounded in his heart. It was not his voice. Please help them. The voice was fleeting, and Shenyan raised his head in shock. Someone bypassed the protective magic circle he set up and started a conversation with him directly in his heart. Who are you? Exclamation mark. The voice gave an answer 2 seconds later. World barrier. I accepted you, the outsider, so I ask you to help them. They are on the wrong path. The mage was stunned. His instinct made him refuse to believe this, but his reason began to make him verify the authenticity of this matter. He disappeared from the spot and appeared in the weak point of the world barrier that he had observed early in the morning. The eye of observation was released. In the dim vision, the only weak point with light began to slowly wriggle, and a line of words appeared on it. I ask you to help them, and I will help you cross the border again. Shenyan was silent. He couldn't think of a reason to refuse. After a moment, he nodded. And he did it as soon as he said it. He closed his eyes and no longer concealed his spiritual power. The incomplete and recovering half of his soul was still strong, sweeping across the world in an instant. All those with magic power in their bodies felt an inexplicable throbbing at that moment. However, only those with high magic power can realize that this is actually a message, an invitation. There are many ways to help. The most efficient one may be to brainwash spellcasters all over the world and just roughly stuff them into let them fend for themselves, completely ignoring the dangers of them meditating alone. But if you ask him what he learned from the more than 700 long and stinky books on the history of magic from all over the world in Guyi's library, Shenyan will tell you one thing. Any wizard who does not regard himself as a human being and is above all living beings will end up miserably. After all, you are born as a human being. Chapter 4, From Restoring Stone Bricks to Traveling Back in Time. Dumbledore, the famous Dumbledore, sat at the head of the long table. No one could tell from his face that he was showing any emotion. Of course, It could also be because his beard was too long, completely covering the lower half of his face. All the teachers at Hogwarts sat at this long table. They looked solemn and no one spoke. They were waiting for Dumbledore to speak. The atmosphere in the quaint room was a little stagnant. I believe everyone felt it 2 days ago. The old man spoke slowly. His voice was full of energy and his words were very clear. It was completely different from his age. To be honest, I'm not sure who or what it was that emitted the magical fluctuations. After many discussions, careful guesses and communications, we still can't tell what it is. However, one thing is certain. After I talked to the principals of magic schools and law enforcement agencies around the world, I can confirm that this phenomenon is global. However, other than that, we still know nothing. He made a gesture. If you have any guesses, please speak up. We need to discuss and brainstorm, don't we? After a long pause, Dumbledore saw his longtime colleague, Professor Minerva McGonagall, speaking. The lady wore a black pointed hat and looked solemn and elegant. She cleared her throat and said, I think it was a message, some kind of invitation. I can feel from that vibration that he has no ill intentions, at least for now. The adjective she used was he, a word that is usually used to refer to gods in the mysterious world. Madame Pomfrey also spoke, and the lady's voice always made people feel her rigor. Although I can't sense the information and the fluctuation as clearly as Professor McGonagall, after conducting physical examinations on all students in the school yesterday, I have also come to some conclusions. She nodded to her colleagues seriously. The fluctuation did not affect them. Some young wizards even had their magic levels increased a little because of that special throbbing. Severus, what do you think? Dumbledore suddenly spoke, asking the gloomy man sitting on his right. This man had greasy black straight hair that grew behind his ears, and his whole body was dressed in black. Thanks to his appearance and dress, he gave people a very depressing feeling. Not only that, his voice was indeed in line with his appearance, deep and with a strange precision. At least, it won't be him. As this sentence was thrown out coldly from his mouth, the temperature in this meeting room with swaying candlelight seemed to drop a little. Except for Dumbledore and Severus who was speaking, everyone's face changed. Dumbledore made another gesture, indicating that he should not continue. The old man stood up, his grey robes dragging on the ground. Dumbledore spoke again with an obligatory attitude, this time, much more solemnly. In fact, everyone, I can feel the exact meaning of the message and the vibration. As Professor McGonagall said, it is indeed an invitation. The location is in Estain, France. I will set off there tomorrow to find out. The time is uncertain. I hope you can do your job during this time and manage all aspects of Hogwarts. He paused for a while, and it was unknown what emotions were brewing in his eyes. After a while, he continued to speak. His tone was slow and terrible. If I don't come back within a week, the position of headmaster will be handed over to Minerva McGonagall. He nodded to Professor McGonagall, and then announced, the meeting is adjourned. Everyone, please go to rest. It's getting late. With this sentence, the meeting ended, and he seemed to become relaxed. Others walked out of the conference room in twos and threes. Only McGonagall, Severus, and Dumbledore, who was eating a bag of candy from nowhere, remained in their seats. Are you really going? The man called Severus suddenly asked with a gloomy face. Of course, if someone invites you to a place, how can you refuse? You can't be an impolite person. Dumbledore winked at him playfully. Severus Snape turned his head and stood up and left without saying a word. Professor McGonagall looked at the old man worriedly, but we don't know if it was him or the other one. Don't worry, Minerva. I have confirmed that my old friend is still staying well in Nurmengard. And I don't think Tom has the ability, otherwise he would be the one sitting here now, Dumbledore said with a smile, his tone lively. He seemed to be not worried at all. However, only he knew the real idea. Professor McGonagall shook her head, stood up and left. Only the old man with white hair and beard was left sitting in the conference room eating candy. His expression was calm. Dumbledore moved very quickly. His mobility was terrifying. This old man, who was the most powerful white wizard of the time, used his old wand to use apparition in the early morning and came to Estain. This beautiful village is located in the countryside of France, surrounded by mountains and rivers. and has a charming environment. Those quaint pointed roof houses were hardly damaged and still retained their antique charm. He had to admit that he almost liked this little place at first sight. However, he came here for business, not to travel. Dumbledore released his magic and began to search the village. It was not until the third time that he found something a little wrong. It was like a hair on the bedsheet. If you don't look carefully, you can't see it at all. He walked towards that place. The pedestrians coming and going on the street ignored him. Let this tall old man with a beard growing to his waist walk around freely. He came to the place and found that it was the door of a villa. He was about to reach out and ring the doorbell. He found that the scene in front of him suddenly changed and he came to a void. It felt like he was in the center of the universe, surrounded by swirling stars, which were shining charmingly. Even Dumbledore was fascinated by this scene for a while. He tried to cast a spell with his Elder Wand, but as soon as he took it out, the wand disappeared. A young voice said, "Ah, interesting. This is the first relatively different enchanted wand I have seen, Your Excellency." Dumbledore calmly prepared to cast a wandless spell, but the young voice laughed again and started another topic. "Don't worry about that, old man. You are the first person to come here. I want to congratulate you for this." His words made Dumbledore a little stunned, and at the same time a little amused and helpless. He didn't know what this person meant. But soon, he found that the stars began to rotate. The young voice spoke again. "Please forgive my rudeness, but this is my personality. You have successfully passed the deception and found this place. You have passed the first test, but there is still a second one." "Test?" Dumbledore smiled curiously. "There should be a reward after the test." "Sir, do you know if I have a reward?" "If I can, I hope the reward is my life and freedom." The young voice laughed. Sense of humor, a rare quality, to remain calm and self-controlled in the face of the unknown, a valuable quality. "Well, sir, do you want to know the reward after the test?" He became serious. "The reward is a brand new road." As soon as the voice fell, the star rotated and flew in front of him. Dumbledore was attracted by the rotating white star, although he didn't want to do so. The inexplicable attraction attracted him like honey. He couldn't look away at all, and he didn't even know why. The surrounding scene began to blur, and only the star was left in his eyes. In the next second, he found himself in an empty square floating in the sky again. "What is this?" "Like I said, just a small test, old man." A young man stood straight with his hands behind his back. He was very tall, with black hair tied into a ponytail that hung down behind his head. "I passed?" "Yes, you passed." A thought emerged in Dumbledore's mind. He asked, "So, what if I didn't pass?" The young man turned around, smiled mischievously and nodded at him. "I don't want to tell you." Pale, thin, and handsome. This was Dumbledore's first impression. In the second, he ignored all of this and stared at the young man's eyes. Those eyes seemed to contain starlight, and just a glance at them would give people the illusion that their souls were being sucked away. As if noticing this, the young man smiled helplessly, and snapped his fingers. Dumbledore noticed that a black shadow flashed between his fingers. He said gently, "I'm sorry, since this is the world of souls, the illusion I used on myself is ineffective." Dumbledore said jokingly, "So, your eyes are really like this?" "Ah, yes. As I improve in magic, my body has also undergone some changes, and this is one of them. I had no choice but to cast a long-lasting illusion on myself." "Let's not talk about that." "Oh, I haven't asked your name yet." "My name is Shenyan, and may I ask who you are?" "Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore." "It's really long, but it doesn't matter." Shenyan smiled and clapped his hands. The sunlight that was originally above his head disappeared instantly, turning into a dark night without stars. He snapped his fingers again, causing a floor tile in the middle of the square to break. In this way, this strange meeting officially kicked off. He pointed at the floor tile and asked, "Excuse me, Mr. Dumbledore, is there any way to restore these broken floor tiles without using a wand?" "I can try." Out of politeness, Dumbledore didn't say it too confidently. He was full of confusion and extreme curiosity about the current situation and everything that the young man showed him. But at the same time, he also understood that this was definitely not something a wizard could do. For a moment, Dumbledore even thought it was a joke of God. The tall and strong old man stretched out his right hand, and the magic power was gathering rapidly in his hand. He hadn't tried to cast a basic spell so seriously for a long time. After a few seconds, he shouted, "Restore as before." So, the broken bricks were restored to their original state. Shenyan applauded, nodded and said, "Amazing, Mr. Dumbledore. You did the best under limited conditions. But I will reveal a completely different possibility for you." After he finished speaking, he pointed casually, and the floor tiles that had just been restored to their original state by Dumbledore's spell became broken again. Dumbledore was shocked to find that it was not performed in the form of any spell he knew. Shenyan noticed his shock and smiled. "It's no big deal. Please look." Dumbledore looked carefully at his outstretched right hand, which was slender and powerful. With a casual finger, the same magic power as when he cast the spell to restore it to its original state surged out. But what he did next made Dumbledore's eyes widen. He saw that Shenyan used that tiny bit of magic to make the floor tile flow backwards in time in an instant. It first turned into the shape after Dumbledore cast the spell, then turned into the shape when Shenyan made it break with magic, and finally, became the shape when it first appeared. There was no trace of magic left, just an ordinary floor tile. Dumbledore was dumbfounded. "Do you understand?" Shenyan asked with a smile. You, how did you do it?" "Please forgive my rudeness." Dumbledore was a little incoherent, and he tried to save his gaffe after noticing this. Shenyan didn't care about that at all. He smiled and pulled Dumbledore, and they squatted down. Shenyan pointed at the land and patiently explained, "The principle of the simple spell you just cast is to use magic and will to make the object return to the appearance of a certain moment in your memory. I said that you may not understand it because it involves the essence of magic, but you should have seen it many times when you use that spell. It is similar to the situation of time going back, right?" Dumbledore nodded blankly. Shenyan continued, "Yes, that is the truth behind this spell, Mr. Dumbledore, and this is what I want to reveal to you. Think about it. If you just use magic to make the object return to the intact appearance in your memory, it can make it produce a reaction similar to time going back. Then, why don't I just let it go back in time?" Shenyan raised his right hand and wrote a word in the air with his index finger. It was the restoration spell that Dumbledore shouted when he cast the spell before. He picked up the black magic spell and mixed it. A black magic ball appeared in his palm. He broke another floor tile and threw the magic ball up. The black magic ball disappeared after a burst of light, and the floor tile became intact again. He said again, "You see, even if you don't use those advanced applications, I can simply change the operating mechanism of this spell, as long as you understand the nature of magic enough." Dumbledore looked up and looked at Shenyan in a trance. After a long time, he asked, "What is the nature of magic?" The wizard smiled and replied, "It is a miracle. Everything that is impossible to happen but happens to happen is a miracle." He pulled Dumbledore to stand up, stretched out a hand, and pretended to shake hands. Dumbledore did not shake his hand at the first time. He still maintained a shocked look. Sir, what do you mean?" He even subconsciously used honorifics. Shenyan raised his eyebrows, and he said humorously, "I want to teach at your Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. I wonder what you think?" He returned the honorifics. After a moment, Dumbledore finally took his outstretched hand. "Please teach me," the old man said solemnly. Chapter 5 What is it like to teach Dumbledore? Thanks for the invitation. 2 days had passed since that conversation, and Dumbledore was almost getting along with Shenyan as an apprentice. However, Dumbledore himself did not think there was anything wrong. The first one is the teacher, and on this new road, he was indeed an apprentice. The old man even felt that his energy had returned to his youth. He no longer cared about those political considerations and the precise calculations in his mind, but simply learned and experienced every bit of the rhythm of magic. Just like now, he was learning the most basic meditation mentioned by Shenyan. He sat cross-legged, with a soft blanket acting as a cushion under his body, and a special fragrance made his thoughts gradually float into the clouds. Dumbledore heard Shenyan's voice coming, as if it was in his ear, and as if it was far away. "You have always used a wand to cast spells before, so this may be a little difficult for you, but it doesn't matter. As long as you master the free use of magic, you are equivalent to half a step in the door. Now, please listen carefully. Relax. Dumbledore did as he was told, and his body completely relaxed, even more than sleeping. Very good. You got into the state quickly. But tomorrow you will try to enter the state of complete emptiness without the help of the potion. Now, imagine that you are floating. He began to imagine that he was floating. As this thought came from the bottom of his heart, he felt a strange joy, as if he was in a dream. Everything around him was far away from him, and the sounds around him became more and more ethereal. The scene gradually became full of fluorescence, and he was shocked to find that he was floating in a wide space with many fluorescent balls. Very good. Now tell me what you see, Shenyan asked. His voice was equally ethereal. Then, he heard his own voice, and the vitality and excitement in the voice made him doubt. Is it my voice? There are bright white spots everywhere, and I am in a pure white space. Try to grab a spot of light, but don't use your hands, but rely on thinking. According to Shenyan's words, he imagined it. He imagined that the light spot closest to him was caught in his hand. A few seconds later, he did not stretch out his hand, and the light spot flew over by itself. I caught it, Dumbledore said excitedly, almost at a loss. Open your eyes, Shenyan said. So Dumbledore opened his eyes, and the ethereal and safe feeling disappeared. He was surprised to find that there was a white magic light spot in the palm of his hand. The old man laughed, and even his wrinkles disappeared. Is this magic? It's your magic. The space you just entered, no matter what you call it, soul space, Garden of Eden, Kabbalah tree, palace, whatever, that is the storage place of magic in your body, Shenyan explained patiently, and he also tapped his temple. Generally speaking, magic is stored in the brain. The amount is complementary to your soul strength and will. As the magic power increases, your body will be very close to the soul without you knowing it. This is also one of the greatest benefits of persisting in meditation. Wizards no longer need to be afraid of demons, because demons no longer have the ability to take away a wizard's soul. Our souls belong only to ourselves, and we are completely free. At this point, he blinked. Of course, I don't know if you have demons here. Dumbledore looked at the soft ball of light in his hand. He could feel the connection between this small ball of light and himself. He asked, in the world you came from, are all wizards like you? What do you mean? Dumbledore then asked. No, I mean, are they all as willing to teach knowledge as you are? Even knowledge like this, even without asking for anything in return? Of course not. Speaking of this question, Shenyan became excited and laughed. In fact, before the 7th century AD, wizards were still hiding that little knowledge from others. The relevant spellcasting knowledge was usually passed down from generation to generation, but if the son or daughter had no talent, they would write a book and take it to the grave. If someone has the ability to pass the protective spell and dig it out, if he happens to have that talent, then he can learn it. After the 17th century, the situation was different. My teacher became the Supreme Sorcerer, a position similar to the Guardian of the World. She traveled around the world and united the loose wizards. After that, we shared knowledge and helped each other. Of course, that's what I said, you know. Shenyan smiled and waved his hand, and a thick book appeared in the air. He showed Dumbledore the cover, Basics and Advanced Applications of Soul Experiments, and then dispersed it. In short, if it weren't for her, I wouldn't be able to see these precious antiques, and magic wouldn't progress. No matter how talented a person is, if he works behind closed doors, he will never be able to beat a group of people. Isn't that right? His words made Dumbledore sigh. He remembered some similar things. Perhaps humans only have a common language in this regard. No matter which world, there will always be differences and mutual contempt. He sighed. In 2 days, he first learned the theory of the construction of magic, and then the combination of spirit and will. Until today's meditation and magic use, in just 2 days, he has completely mastered these precious knowledge from another world that may have taken thousands of years to develop. A heavy feeling came over me. Well, the break is almost over. If you are interested in the history of magic in my world, I can give you a few books after this crash course is over, and you can read them yourself then. As for now, get ready, Mr. Dumbledore. I'm going to teach you how to use your will to influence the real world. This may be a little painful. Pain? Dumbledore didn't understand what he meant until Shenyan slapped him on the forehead. The huge amount of magic power directly knocked his soul out of his body. With a burst of pain, he looked at his body in shock, and it remained in the same place, even sitting cross-legged and breathing slowly. Am I dead? How is that possible, Mr. Dumbledore? Besides, even if you are really dead, I have a way to pull you back. Shenyan shook his head. I just want you to see this process from the perspective of the soul, so that you can see it more clearly. By the way, I will reveal a little knowledge. The soul's eye can usually see more things than the naked eye, and it is the same in all aspects. He stretched out his right hand, and the black magic power gathered into a ball in his palm. Shenyan reminded, look carefully. As he finished speaking, the ball gradually twisted and deformed in his palm. A minute later, it became a piece of bread. Shenyan took a bite and nodded with satisfaction. Yes, it tastes okay. This spell is the basis of a series of transfiguration spells. You can call it bread-making spell. Sometimes when I am bored at Christmas, I will dress up as Jesus and go out to distribute bread to the homeless. His sudden sense of humor made Dumbledore laugh. As for the key points, you need to fully understand the making method of bread, the texture, taste, and smell. Of course, it doesn't matter if you don't know the taste, you just need to think that this thing can fill your stomach, but the final product may be bland. You have to rely on your spirit and will to drive the magic power, and use your imagination to turn the magic power into bread. After mastering it, you can also try to change other things, anything, as long as you succeed for the first time. The operating principle of this spell and the flow of magic power will be engraved in your mind. At that time, you don't need to imagine deliberately, and you can make bread with a wave of your hand. But for more advanced ones, you need to remember the spell model and related formations. This kind of magic that does not require preparation is the same. After he finished speaking, he ate the remaining half of the bread in one bite, and sent Dumbledore's soul back to his body, and said, now, you try it. Just change something you like. Dumbledore did as he was told, and even couldn't wait to try it. It was just like a driving school student who just got on the car. The soft white ball of light in his hand did not move for 5 minutes, and beads of sweat had already appeared on Dumbledore's forehead. Shenyan did not urge him, nor did he speak. He just patiently watched his first official student's efforts, who hasn't cast a spell for the first time. The first time is always very difficult. Encouragement and patience are the right way. 10 minutes later, the ball of light turned into a small long strip. 15 minutes later, Dumbledore had begun to sweat violently. His eyes were wide open behind the crescent lens, and he gritted his teeth. And the ball of light finally turned into a small white candy. Very good, try it. A smile bloomed on Shenyan's face, and he suddenly felt a sense of accomplishment. Dumbledore took a breath and threw the candy into his mouth. The familiar taste made him laugh, and the old man's smile was as innocent as a child at this time. It seems that I haven't eaten candy for so many years in vain. Shenyan pulled him up from the ground, made a gesture, and the door to the basement opened. Now, go and take a rest. The spirit needs to be restored. Casting spells for a long time will cause some minor problems. Fatigue is one of the most obvious symptoms. Stop when you feel tired. Don't cast spells when you are tired unless you have to. Do you understand? Dumbledore nodded and went upstairs to the yard to bask in the sun. When he walked out of the basement, Shenyan snapped his fingers again. He took out a blank book with beginner's spell encyclopedia on the cover and began to compile it with magic. Chapter 6, showing you a one-chapter showdown with Voldemort. Dumbledore was basking in the sun. The afternoon sun was not as strong as that at noon. However, this made an old man of his age feel particularly comfortable and even a little sleepy. He hadn't studied and rested like this for a long time. He was usually busy with various affairs. Wait, did I forget something? Dumbledore, who was lying on the recliner with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes. He suddenly remembered that today was the third day, and he should reply to Hogwarts after finding out the situation. But he remembered that there was no fireplace in the villa, and it would be too difficult to pass the message from France to Hogwarts in Britain through the Patroness. Thinking of this, he simply stood up and went back to the basement. His teacher, Although he didn't call Shenyan that, the two seemed to have tacitly agreed to this matter. There was a book floating in front of Shenyan. Seeing him coming, Shenyan put away the book. He asked, "What's the matter?" Dumbledore explained the matter, and the wizard nodded. "This is simple. Let's go back to your school together. It just so happens that I should take up the post, right?" The old man laughed. They walked out of the gate of the villa. Dumbledore stood in the open space in front of the villa with empty hands, looking at Shenyan and clapping his hands. The country villa where he had lived for 2 days disappeared, and the original place became a small forest. Noticing Dumbledore's eyes, Shenyan explained, "This is a simple spell under the travel spell column. When I compile my book, you will understand it." "Book?" "Yes, there must be textbooks in class, right?" "I'm looking forward to it." Dumbledore took out his wand and said, "Let's use apparition to go back." "Apparition? Oh, you are talking about the somewhat dangerous teleportation spell. How about I show you a more interesting one?" Shenyan deliberately slowed down. With his right hand, he casually drew a circle in the air. He even deliberately let Dumbledore feel the flow of magic. As he moved, an arc gradually appeared in the air, like a mirror, shining with black magic. He put a hand on Dumbledore and said, "Now think about your school. What is it called?" Dumbledore said, "Hogwarts." Then, the black center of the arc slowly changed color and expanded, and the scenery inside became the place where the old man had spent most of his life, his school, the main teaching building of Hogwarts. "Now, go in. Be careful not to have any resistance when you pass through the door, otherwise you may leave something behind the door," Shenyan said tactfully, and walked in with Dumbledore. After passing through the portal, they returned to Hogwarts in the blink of an eye. In front of them was the main gate of Hogwarts. There were many students walking in groups of 3 or 2 on the grass and by the lake, or sitting together and talking. They didn't notice a tall stranger and their familiar principal standing in front of the open door. Dumbledore was particularly surprised, even a little envious. He did not feel the uncomfortable feeling of apparition, as if someone was squeezed out of a rubber pipe. There was no harsh popping sound. In fact, it was just like walking out the door on a leisurely afternoon to prepare for a walk. It was too relaxing. Back at school, Dumbledore had a special temperament. His back was straighter, and without Shenyan saying anything, Dumbledore led him forward. They passed through the heavy and exquisite oak door, and opposite was a very luxurious marble staircase. On the right was a double door, and Dumbledore introduced that it was the auditorium. It was where students and professors had their meals, and it was also where the sorting ceremony for new students was held every year. Sorting ceremony? Shenyan's eyes lit up. He always had a lot of greed for various magical knowledge. "Ah, yes. We have a little gadget called the sorting hat. When you put it on, it will read out the characteristics of each person's personality, which can help us sort them into students with similar personalities. A total of 4 colleges. These 4 colleges are named after the surnames of the founders: Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin," he explained as he and Shenyan walked up the stairs. The wizard nodded, and the students passing by saw the headmaster taking a handsome stranger to tour the campus and personally introducing him to the various past events of Hogwarts, and they all ran away excitedly. Only those who were older would guess that he might be an adult wizard visiting from abroad, and he was in a high position, so they all greeted him. Shenyan accepted it all. He would soon be their teacher, so why not? As for Dumbledore, he didn't have to think about it. He might make a fuss for a long time during dinner tonight. This news would spread among the students at an explosive speed at that time. He smiled helplessly and continued his tour guide work, which he also enjoyed very much. He really loved this ancient castle, which witnessed his life. They went up to the 2nd floor. The moving murals and strange floating staircases along the way made Shenyan laugh. He said, "It seems that both wizards in my world have strange tastes in these places." Dumbledore also laughed and said, "This castle is too old. Even as the headmaster, I can't control every aspect of it. For these small details, let it go." After walking through a corridor, Dumbledore took him to knock on a door. A lady's voice sounded from inside the door, "Come in." So Dumbledore pushed the door open and introduced to Shenyan, Minerva McGonagall. the headmaster of Gryffindor College. My good friend, colleague, and a reliable person. The lady who was sitting at the desk writing something stood up in surprise and looked at the headmaster and the handsome stranger. A warm fire was burning in the fireplace behind her. The room was small, but full of warmth. Hello, Miss McGonagall. My name is Shenyan. You can just call me he. We will be colleagues for a while in the future. Shenyan smiled at her politely and stretched out his right hand. From her appearance, he could tell that this lady must be a serious and reliable person, and her attire, standing posture, and even the neat handwriting on the parchment scroll on the table could prove this. This made him feel a little favorable. Wizards always like such people. Professor McGonagall walked out from behind the desk. She glanced at Dumbledore, smiled politely and shook hands with Shenyan. Hello, Mr. He. I don't know what you are doing. Dumbledore smiled with some ill intentions. He usually behaved a little mischievously when facing old friends. This is my teacher. He was satisfied to see that the expression on McGonagall's face quickly turned into shock. And you are definitely kidding me. Dumbledore did not stop there. He went even further and nodded seriously. You heard it right, Minerva. This is indeed my teacher. Please inform the other teachers that we will have a short meeting in the conference room at 6 p.m. I will explain it then. Leaving Professor McGonagall nodding absent-mindedly, Dumbledore continued to take Shenyan to tour Hogwarts. He pointed to the grass outside the French window. The view from here is very good, right? Shenyan touched his chin and said, well, for me personally, it might be better if there were some other embellishments. What is it? You won't like this, believe me, Dumbledore. Shenyan smiled and skipped the topic. His magical plants are more terrifying than each other. It is normal for the materials of potions to look ugly. The two walked up to the third floor. When passing by the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher's office, Shenyan took the initiative to stop here. He frowned and asked, well, it may be a bit true to ask this, but, Dumbledore, what are the recruitment standards of Hogwarts? What do you mean? Dumbledore was a little puzzled. Shenyan shook his head. Out of politeness, he did not use his mind to scan the entire school as soon as he arrived, which was why he discovered the rancid magical aura on the man inside when he walked here. Thinking of this, he simply stopped suppressing himself and began to put all his strength on the man inside. In an instant, a muffled groan came from behind the door, followed by the sound of something falling to the ground. Dumbledore pushed the door open, and when he saw the back of the man lying on the ground, his expression almost froze. For a moment, he was speechless. Shenyan stood beside him and asked, forgive me for acting without asking you, but the stench on this guy makes me very sure that he is not the same as you. Yes, yes. Dumbledore raised and put down his trembling right hand. After a moment, he finally remembered where his glasses were. He took off his glasses, rubbed his brows, sighed, and said, this is one of my former students, Tom Riddle. I mean the one on the back of his head. He was very good in school, but unfortunately he went astray. He launched large-scale terrorist attacks throughout the UK, trying to control the entire world. We paid a very painful price, and after defeating him, he disappeared. I didn't expect that he could actually lurk in the school. Dumbledore looked much older and more relaxed as he talked about the past history, as if he had unloaded a burden. Shenyan listened to him and rarely made any comments. However, his gaze on the inhuman face was somewhat disdainful. Then, he snapped his fingers lightly. The man lying on the ground woke up immediately. He got up with a tumble, looked at Dumbledore in horror, and touched the back of his bald head. A voice cursed, "Idiot! What are you touching?" "Master, Master, Dumbledore is here." He looked like he was about to faint. Dumbledore sighed again and said, "Please turn around, Mr. Quirrell." Quirrell was not frightened by the curses of the voice, nor did he obey his obstruction and the order to draw his wand. He chose to obey Dumbledore's gentle command. Quirrell turned around trembling. An ugly face moved on the back of his head. He had slender scarlet eyes, which were burning with the flame of resentment, and a flat nose with only 2 slits. The words were as cold as a snake spitting out its tongue. "Dumbledore, what are you waiting for? Do it." All the emotions that Dumbledore had exposed before were restrained. He stood there straight, not afraid of this terrifying face. He drew out his wand, but did not cast a spell. He just said one sentence lightly, and there was even pity in his tone. "Tom, you don't have to go this far." The person he called Tom, or the face roared, "Enough, you hypocritical old fool, do it." "What are you still talking about? I think it's better not to do it first." Shenyan suddenly spoke. He narrowed his eyes, looked at this ugly creature that had lost its human form, and said something shocking. "You are really brave, Mr. Tom Riddle. You dared to split your soul rashly and divide it into several equally conscious beings when you only have a vague understanding of the soul. It's courageous, but it's really stupid." Tom widened his scarlet and narrow eyes. He was so angry that he could only spit out a few vague words. "How dare you? How dare you?" His focus was on the evaluation of stupidity. "Of course I dare, Mr. Tom Riddle. Look at your current appearance. Do you dare to say that you are not? You are not only stupid, but your current existence is no different from that of a parasite." Shenyan laughed sarcastically, but he soon lost interest. He raised his hand, snapped his fingers, and simply sealed Tom's mouth with magic. Then he pointed casually, and a black beam of light hit the face. Tom Riddle opened his mouth in silent screams. A few seconds later, he flowed down from the back of Quirrell's head like a piece of paper. Quirrell fainted on the spot, and he fell to the ground again. His nose was broken, and blood was all over the floor. Shenyan glanced at him and cast a spell to stop the bleeding on the poor man. An accomplice with no choice, an unlucky assistant. He may be guilty, but he is not guilty of death. Besides, there is no need to ask everyone to choose to sacrifice their lives in the face of life and death. Yes, in just a short while, he had already looked through Quirrell's memory and learned how Tom Riddle had coerced and bribed him. Dumbledore walked forward, picked up Tom Riddle, who was cursing silently and looked like a piece of skin, and looked at the wizard inquiringly. The latter just sighed. "That's it, Dumbledore. I believe you have some other uses for him, right? After the meeting tonight, we will discuss about learning. Now, you can do your own things and don't worry about me. I'll go shopping by myself." Dumbledore nodded and left. He did have to do something at this time, such as getting the Ministry of Magic to announce the capture of Voldemort, who had been on the run for a long time, imprisoning Quirrell in Azkaban, interrogating Voldemort, or using magic to find the location of his Horcrux. Even if Shenyan didn't say it, he would say that he would leave for a while, and since Shenyan was so reasonable, he was happy to let him go. The wizard turned around and left without hesitation. To be honest, he quite liked this castle. The magic here was very old and backward, but the ideas were very interesting. While wandering around unknowingly, he came all the way to the 8th floor. Chapter 7 Wandering and Some Thoughts. Almost no one noticed him. Shenyan just wanted to stroll around by himself, so he used a special trick to make his presence very low. I know that some people would like to learn this little trick and use it in abnormal places. Back to the topic. If he were to rate this ancient castle, he would give it 85. It's great. Apart from the elegant architectural style of the castle, the exquisite and restrained decoration inside also suited his taste. Of course, he also noticed the ghosts that walked around the castle at will, the portraits with their own consciousness and the living sculptures. To be honest, these things are not uncommon. He himself knows a lot of ways to put the souls of living people into portraits and sculptures for easy torture, and there are also spells to make souls become ghosts. But the various creations in this castle are not like this. They are not created by people in a malicious way. This is very interesting. Ghosts that are not created by negative energy and portraits without living souls in them, in his opinion, are as precious and interesting as cats that eat with their butts. If you are a biologist, you will probably want to study this cat that is born to eat with its butt immediately. The wizard couldn't help but sigh that his choice to embark on the road home was indeed correct. Not only could he find his home little by little, but he could also see some new magic and see new scenery in the process. What could be better than this? Ancient One once laughed and said that he was a person with a thirst for magic knowledge, and he agreed with this. He stopped in front of a tapestry called Trolls Beating Stupid Barnabas for a while, turned his head and looked at the wall opposite the tapestry. Out of some courtesy, he did not study the magic that looked like folding space without authorization, but continued to move forward. In the next half an hour, He basically visited the ancient castle except for the students' tower and some professors' offices. He finally chose to stay in front of an open window, overlooking the grass, woods, and the big lake below. There was an inexplicable joy in his heart. Very good, let's start from here. Dumbledore had already apparated to the Ministry of Magic with Tom Riddle, not to mention the ordinary staff who almost fainted after seeing the piece of skin in his hand. Even the Minister of Magic Cornelius Fudge was not much better. He took out a silk handkerchief to wipe his sweaty face, looked at the tall old man, and smiled weakly. "My respected Dumbledore, what is this?" Dumbledore did not show any contemptuous expression. He simply gestured to Fudge to calm down, and then put Tom Riddle on the table. The Dark Lord who existed as a piece of skin seemed to make Fudge nervous. He almost slipped off the chair. Seeing that he was sweating more and more, Dumbledore had to explain, "Dear Fudge, can't you see? This is the Voldemort we have been looking for many years." He deliberately said the name, and Voldemort's skin immediately began to curse silently again. In fact, he never stopped, but no one could hear it, so they could only guess by the shape of his lips. Fudge sat up straight immediately, not because of excitement, but because of fear. He immediately drew his wand and pointed it at Voldemort, trying to look very brave, and began to call the errors loudly. Political achievements. While waiting for the errors to arrive, he also asked Dumbledore if he could call the reporters as well, and after receiving an ambiguous permission, Fudge's happiness was obvious. This would be a very dazzling achievement in his political achievements. However, Dumbledore surprisingly did not have much emotional fluctuations. He felt more relaxed than ever before. Looking back on his life, the first half was entangled with a Dark Lord, and the second half was entangled with another. Now the old one has been in prison for decades, and the young one has been found in Hogwarts after 10 years of absconding. Feeling relieved, he had nothing else in his mind now, just wanting to finish the work quickly. After dealing with Fudge and the reporters at a very fast speed and in an absent-minded manner, he pulled Fudge aside, his face straightened, and became serious. "Dear Fudge, I know you are going to do something with him, but he has not been completely solved. Do you understand? You can spread the news of his arrest to see if there are any Death Eaters who are still unwilling to give up to come and rob, but I need him alive, for now." Dumbledore stopped looking at Fudge after saying this, and he did not explain anything to Fudge. He walked to Fudge's fireplace and disappeared in a burst of flames. As for the Minister of Magic, he finally came back to his senses after being in a daze for a long time, and walked back to his desk with a smile on his face, intending to open a bottle of wine for himself to celebrate. At 6 o'clock that evening, Professor McGonagall saw Dumbledore push open the door in the conference room. Behind him was the young man she had seen in the afternoon. Professor Trelawney, who was sitting opposite her, immediately let out a short exclamation, and then fell on the table. Her face was so bad that she looked like she was about to faint. Professor Flitwick next to her helped her up so that she would not embarrass herself in front of the guests. As for the famous ghost professor, Mr. Binns, he did not come at all. Even if Professor McGonagall spent a long time this afternoon to find him in a corner of the castle and informed him, it would still be the same. Madame Hooch and Professor Sinister were quite interested in this handsome man. Only Snape still had that half-dead face, and he seemed to care nothing. Dumbledore and Shenyan walked into the meeting room. He did not introduce Shenyan first, but said, "Please allow me to announce 2 things to you first. The shame of this school, the infamous Voldemort. Tom Riddle was discovered by Mr. He at 4 p.m. He somehow possessed the body of Quirina Squirrel, the professor of defense against the dark arts. Forgive me, a slow old man, for not discovering him, but fortunately, our good gentleman discovered him, so that we don't have Voldemort giving lectures to our students. He has been taken to the Ministry of Magic, and everyone will be able to see reports about this in the newspaper tomorrow at the latest." Professor McGonagall felt dizzy, with both the joy of Voldemort's capture and the fear of what Dumbledore said. The other professors all began to discuss quietly. Only Snape, his sallow face turned pale, and an abnormal red flush appeared. His hands clenched tightly under the table. "The second thing is that our school will reform and adopt a new teaching method." After he finished speaking, he winked playfully and turned his head to look at Shenyan beside him. "It's your turn." Shenyan smiled and prepared to speak. Late at night, Professor McGonagall sat in her office absent-mindedly. At this time of the year, she should be marking homework seriously, but now, she has no such thoughts at all. All she thinks about is the miracle that the man showed at the meeting. Miracle. There is no other way to describe it except miracle. The magic used by wizards is a world of difference compared to the spells he used casually, which he called simple and basic, and Snape was very skeptical about the other world at first, thinking that Dumbledore was old and confused and believed in a charlatan. He could no longer speak until they were all illuminated by the white star, and he was in a state of trance the whole time. Professor McGonagall noticed one thing at this time. She had been staring at the table for more than half an hour. She reluctantly put down her quill and planned to change her clothes, take a bath and go to bed. But it would be difficult to fall asleep. She was like this at her age, not to mention being stimulated like this. She was actually looking forward to tomorrow. She didn't know if her other colleagues would feel the same, but she knew that this incident meant a huge change for the whole world. That way of casting spells and controlling magic simply fascinated her. Snape was standing outside the headmaster's office at this time, and he seemed a little uneasy, which was rare for him. Dumbledore came out, nodded to him and said hello, Severus. Snape didn't even notice him coming out at first, and only looked up after hearing the voice. He pulled Dumbledore's sleeve and didn't even say a word at first. Are you serious? He was arrested? Dumbledore looked at him and nodded slowly and forcefully. Snape stumbled back a few steps, and then he realized that the Phoenix was standing on Dumbledore's shoulder and he was holding a black suitcase in his hand. Snape asked, "What are you doing?" "Oh, you mean this. I don't plan to be the headmaster anymore." "What?" Dumbledore was very satisfied to see Snape's shocked expression. He said with that classic smile after a successful prank, "Just kidding, just moving. I plan to use this office as the place for teachers to take classes for the next month, wait until the official start of the school, and then return it. After all, students also have to go to class, at least before the end of this semester. They still have to take those exams." Snape nodded. He licked his dry lips, and asked hesitantly, I mean, that Mr. He, is he in there?" Dumbledore knew what he wanted to ask, so he nodded simply. Of course, he should be preparing lessons in there. After saying this, Dumbledore knocked on the brass handle with an eagle's body and a lion's head on the door, put it to sleep, and left, leaving Snape standing there alone. In the dim corridor, the candlelight in front of the headmaster's office illuminated half of his face. The face that was usually expressionless and indifferent was now full of hope. He slowly pushed open the door that anyone could enter because the handle was dormant, and his heart was filled with complex emotions that he couldn't explain. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8: Resurrection. And the first lesson. Of course, Shenyan heard the sound of the door opening and the slow footsteps behind him. He was not surprised by Snape's arrival. He had seen many people like this, especially Dumbledore, who reminded him indirectly. It seems that in every world, the British like to beat around the bush. Snape entered the room and found that the space had become more than 5 times larger than before. The portraits of the previous headmasters were gone, and Dumbledore's table piled with all kinds of sundries also disappeared. Only the walls and the ground retained their original colors. There was nothing else, just an empty room. He saw the man standing in the middle of the room with his back to him. He walked a little closer and said loudly, "Mr. He, do you remember me? We met in the afternoon. I am Severus Snape. I came here to ask you about resurrection or something, right?" Shenyan answered without even turning around. Snape was struck by lightning. Anyone who was poked with the idea buried in his heart for more than 10 years would not feel good. However, he could only nod silently. Shenyan finally turned around. He was holding a book in his hand and was flipping through it. On the thick brown cover, the words "standard spells" were written in cursive letters, and there was a line of small words below, saying that one book was better than 6. He flipped through the book and said casually, "Of course, this kind of thing is not difficult for wizards." But the wizard raised his head and did not say the second half of the sentence, but stretched out his voice. "Here he comes. He is going to put forward conditions." Snape's heart trembled, but it was natural to have conditions. A new, better, and more advanced way of casting spells and magic that can even resurrect the dead. It would be strange if there were no conditions. He was even ready to complete whatever Shenyan proposed, even if it meant killing Dumbledore. But what he didn't expect was that Shenyan just asked a question. He raised his head and said, "Why do you want to disturb the dead?" After a long silence, Snape spoke with difficulty. He tried hard to make his words clear, but the harder he tried, the more he failed. His tongue was like a rusty 5-cent coin in his mouth. Because she died in an accident, she shouldn't have died like that, and she was very brave. She died to protect her daughter. He spoke slower and slower, and clearer, as if he had to use all his strength to say every word, "and I owe her an apology. I won't help you." As expected, Snape lowered his head. His long, untrimmed fingernails pierced into his palms, and blood flowed. "But I will teach you. You are very talented. It depends on how much you can learn in this month. After a month, I will still teach students, and the progress will be based on them." Snape seemed to raise his head suddenly. The joy on his face was not concealed, and the speed of expression change was comparable to some ancient unique skills. Shenyan said calmly, "Don't be too happy, Mr. Snape. I have requirements for students. Especially for those of you who are talented, I may be stricter. My personal advice is that you'd better be prepared." He paused deliberately. "And it's best to take care of personal hygiene. It's best to take a bath every day, Mr. Snape." Shenyan even made a joke humorously. "I think the lady also hopes that she will be resurrected by a clean man, right?" Snape did not fall asleep that night. In fact, since that day, it has been difficult for him to fall asleep peacefully. Sometimes he went to bed early, but he would always be awakened by nightmares in the middle of the night. In the dream, there was Voldemort laughing crazily, and she was lying in a pool of blood. Snape wanted to take out his wand to cast a spell on Voldemort, but he couldn't even move. Sometimes it was even more difficult, and he couldn't even sleep all night. As soon as he closed his eyes, it was her. The guilt in his heart increased every day, and so did the love that was not responded to. This kind of condemnation from conscience will gradually devour a person. And today, he clearly got the opportunity to reverse all this, but he still couldn't fall asleep. His heart was filled with those green eyes. Once upon a time, in the best days in Snape's memory, they would look into each other's eyes. He had seen the entire universe in those eyes, a poetic universe, a universe that he had never owned. The poem was too beautiful to be copied, even impossible to remember. This man who never easily expressed his emotions stared at the white moonlight pouring down from the bedside, and he actually began to shed tears silently, crying silently in the darkness. At 8:45 the next day, Shenyan was already dressed neatly in the magic classroom in the former principal's office, waiting for his students. He used the same magic he used on Dumbledore yesterday on the others, and the effect was remarkable, and he was very satisfied. At 9 o'clock, everyone was present. All the current teachers at Hogwarts stood in this empty room, except for Professor Binns, who could not come for personal reasons, and Professor Trelawney, who refused to come no matter what. They were all there. Shenyan snapped his fingers, and chairs and tables that met the number of people appeared in the empty room. He gestured and smiled, signaling the students to go over and sit down. Although it was a bit strange to teach a group of teachers whose combined ages were several times older than his own, Shenyan was happy to teach them as long as they were willing to learn. He did not think that sharing knowledge was a sin. Besides, they had all passed the test. After they all sat down, a floating blackboard appeared behind Shenyan. Black magic formed a pen behind him and automatically began to write. It was a theory about the basic connection between spirit and soul, and some simple meditation preparation knowledge. Severus Snape was wearing a brand new black suit, and even his hair was cut short and his beard was shaved clean. He took a cowhide book that was obviously just bought and wrote on it with a feather pen. He was unwilling to miss a single word on the blackboard, and even copied down the title in full. McGonagall was speechless when she watched beside him, thinking, "Were you so serious when you were still studying?" The first class lasted for a total of 1.5 hours without a break, and Flitwick even looked a little unsatisfied. This little man had unimaginable energy in his body, especially when he was exposed to this kind of new knowledge. That energy would burst out completely. He was the one who made the fastest progress. Even Dumbledore couldn't compare to him, which surprised Shenyan. He then slightly increased the teaching progress of Flitwick in his mind. After the first class, there was a total of 20 minutes of rest time for them to digest the knowledge they had just learned. However, this amount of time was definitely not enough for them to fully understand and digest it. Just like Severus Snape now, he sat in his seat, propped up his face and thought, staring at the neat handwriting on his leather book in silence. Shenyan walked forward, patted Snape on the shoulder, and said, "If there is anything you don't understand, feel free to ask questions at any time, Mr. Severus." Snape looked up in a trance. He looked at the young man, then pointed to a paragraph in the leather book and asked, "I don't quite understand this paragraph, Mr. He. The soul and body are so closely connected that even death cannot separate them, unless the devil takes them to hell, or angels take them to heaven. Would the souls of the deceased always sleep in the body?" Shenyan thought for a moment and replied, "This is true in most cases. Since I haven't found any traces of heaven and hell in your world, you can take it as 100%. In other words, yes." Snape's body shook. Shenyan knew the reason, and he didn't disturb this man who became restrained because of the approaching hope. This is human nature. He has already begun to think about how to start the next class. Chapter 9. Snape knocks on the door of number 4, Privet Drive. The first day of classes can be said to have ended perfectly. Everyone was very enthusiastic about learning, and their progress was so fast that Shenyan was a little surprised. However, considering that these people were originally wizards, it was not surprising that they learned faster than ordinary people who were exposed to magic for the first time in the previous world. He was sitting in the empty principal's office at this time. Dumbledore sat cross-legged not far from him, with his eyes tightly closed, breathing slowly and powerfully. He was cushioned by a warm blanket, and dots of white magic light emanated rhythmically from his body. Snape was watching Dumbledore not far away. He was so focused that it seemed that even every breath of Dumbledore in meditation was worth recording. Shenyan sat on the other side. He lay on a comfortable and wide chair and read the standard spells. On the ground next to him was a tattered, patched pointed hat with a blurred face in the middle. The famous hat was chattering non-stop. "Can't you put me on a chair? The ground is too cold. Young man, don't you have any basic respect for me? I am the most magical hat in the world." Shenyan yawned, and he didn't even look at the dirty hat. The oil stains on the hat could even reflect light, as if it had never been cleaned for centuries. He said slowly, "No, this is your punishment for saying I should go to Azkaban." He turned a page of the book and suddenly smiled. "I'm actually very curious. You have survived as a hat that detects people's personalities for centuries. Don't you find it boring?" The Sorting Hat didn't speak for quite a long time. It can read minds and has the wisdom of the 4 founders of Hogwarts. It can be said to be one of the smartest magical items that most wizards and witches can see in their lifetime. So, it fully understood what the young man was hinting at. It finally spoke with difficulty. "What you are going to do to the wizarding world is unprecedented, and it may lead to a very bad result. Actually, I want to correct you on one point." Shenyan suddenly became interested. He knew why the hat said that he should go to Azkaban when he put it on, because it saw some of the ideas he deliberately released. But he didn't care. He smiled faintly and said, "I didn't do those things, did I? Besides, everything depends on human beings, right? What I am going to do to this world is indeed unprecedented, because it is a change that represents progress." He stood up, stared at the dirty surface of the Sorting Hat, and waved. The Sorting Hat flew in front of him and heard his happy voice. "Dumbledore has taken time to go to the Ministry of Magic this afternoon to inform them that Hogwarts will completely change the previous teaching methods and courses in the new school year. If even your headmaster agrees with my idea, what else can you do? You are just a hat." He spun the sorting hat in the air, and black magic appeared out of thin air, cleaning its surface. The originally brown-black hat now looked white, which was enough to prove how dirty it was. The wizard who saw this finally had undisguised disgust in his eyes. He put the sorting hat back on the ground. "As a hat, you can only watch me change all this. Whether it is good or bad, you can see for yourself." After saying this, he ignored the silent sorting hat. He continued to read. The next period of time was very peaceful. Shenyan praised Flitwick's efforts and talent more than once in class. He was the fastest learner. As time went by, they were all able to meditate skillfully. Snape was the most difficult one among them. He had to use potions more than once to calm himself down. He seemed to never be able to really calm down. Time passed little by little until August 30th, and Shenyan gave them 2 days off. September 1st was the beginning of the new semester at Hogwarts, and a series of complicated things needed to be done, such as welcoming new students, sorting them into houses, and guiding them to move in. Shenyan planned to let Dumbledore and others take charge of the students in the second year and above, and he would take charge of the freshmen. Meditation and basic knowledge are very necessary parts of magic, and he would feel at ease if he did it himself. If something went wrong, he would not forgive himself. Since he had already taken on this responsibility, he had to do it to the end and do it to the best of his ability. The faculty and staff went to make preparations, while he himself stayed in the former principal's office and continued to write his book. Snape knocked on the door of Dumbledore's new office. After getting permission, he walked in and adjusted his black suit a little awkwardly. Dumbledore smiled mischievously. "You look good, Severus." Snape did look good. He combed his short hair and shaved his beard clean. He even used aftershave that he didn't know where he got from. At this moment, wearing a well-fitting suit, he looked more like a Wall Street elite than a wizard. He took a deep breath, picked up the black suitcase that Dumbledore had prepared for him, and said, "I'll go now and pick her up." "You don't have to, I insist." Dumbledore shrugged. In a wave of magic, Snape opened the portal and left. Dumbledore sat behind his desk and shook his head. He took off his crescent-shaped glasses, looked at the scenery outside the window and smiled without saying a word. Number 4, Privet Drive. Snape appeared in this quiet community. The portal was completely different from the apparition, and it made no sound. He had thought about this day countless times, but when this day really came, he still felt very nervous. He swallowed and licked his lips subconsciously. He walked up and knocked on the door. "Who is it?" A fat man opened the door. He looked like a pig, Snape thought. The man's facial features were squeezed together by fat, and there was another layer of chin hanging on his chin. He even gave people a feeling of effort just standing there. The man looked at Snape, and suddenly put on a smiling face, and his tone became gentle. "Hello, sir. What can I do for you?" "Harry Potter." He uttered 4 words, and there was not even a superfluous word. The man's face changed. After a brief hesitation, he pointed at Snape and said fiercely, "You are one of them?" "Damn it. For God's sake, you'd better leave here now. We don't have this person here." No, really?" Snape asked coldly. The man suddenly began to float, his face turned red, and he opened his mouth to scream. But Snape pointed casually, "Shut up." He no longer cared about the fat pig floating on the ceiling. In fact, he had always complained about Dumbledore asking them to take care of Harry. Before, under the pressure of Voldemort, he did not express his opinion. But now, some things must change. He stepped into the room, glanced around, and saw a boy who was as fat as a pig as his father, and a woman he had seen at the dining table. Although he had black hair, his green eyes were exactly the same as hers. Snape's expression was still cold, but his tone was a little gentler. "Petunia Dursley, I'm here to find Harry Potter." "Where is she?" Petunia held a spatula tightly in her hand. She pulled her son, Dudley, up from the large plate of bacon in front of him, dragged him behind her, and then pointed palely at a door under the stairs. "Stairs?" Snape frowned. He walked over, and his leather shoes squeaked on the floor. Dudley wanted to say something, but his mother covered his mouth tightly. Snape opened the door, and a thin red-haired figure was sleeping on his shabby wooden bed with his back to him. The four legs of the bed were supported by books and were not stable. He even saw a nest of spiders in the corner. The place was full of mold and the space was so small that he even had to bend over to enter. The man was silent for a while. He did not wake up the girl, but turned around and closed the door gently. He closed his eyes and took 2 deep breaths. The complicated emotions in his heart became more tangled. Petunia murmured and wanted to say something. Snape raised his hand and motioned her to shut up. The woman obeyed. He calmed himself down, opened the door again and walked in. He patted the girl awake. She rubbed her messy hair and sat up sleepily, fumbled for a few times to put on her glasses, looked at Snape with her emerald eyes and said, Sir? Excuse me, what can I do for you? Are you a government worker? Did Aunt Petunia send me away? Snape just stared at her blankly. 2 minutes passed, until the girl felt a little uneasy about this. He said dryly, I am a teacher at Hogwarts. You can call me Severus Snape. I am here to take you to school. Harry blinked. She tilted her head and said, Hogwarts, what is that? Snape was stunned for a moment. He asked, Didn't you receive the letter? What letter? He turned his head and looked at the woman in the corner of the kitchen. She ran to the trash can trembling and dug out a pile of letters and handed them to Snape, then ran away sobbing. These letters. Snape handed them to her and then walked out of the room. It was a surprise to sign the contract. In addition, due to personal reasons, there is only one update today. I am sorry, I will make up for it tomorrow. And there will be 3 updates tomorrow. Chapter 10 I am a professor, so I can. 20 minutes later, Harry, dressed neatly, sat at the dining table. She saw her uncle and Anne huddled on the sofa in the living room with faces full of fear. Dudley was squeezed in the middle of them, and even had difficulty breathing. They didn't even dare to breathe, due to the size difference between them. The scene looked quite absurd and comical. It seems that the professor did something to them, Harry thought. She looked down at the letter in her hand. A wizard school? Is that what I think? Sir, are you kidding me? Snape tried hard to make his expression look gentler. However, he spoke like Tom Hanks who had been trapped on a desert island for more than 10 years. Yes, there will be some changes this year, but it will still teach people how to master magic. Harry looked at the letter in her hand again, and she suddenly asked, Sir, do you know me? Snape looked at her. The sun shone on her through the window behind the kitchen, and the dust in the air was even clearly visible. Her red hair, those emerald green eyes. For a moment, Snape thought he had returned to the past. For some reason, he did not answer the question, but awkwardly changed the subject. Ms. Potter, if you like, I can take you to prepare for school now. We will officially start school on September 1st, so there are still 2 days. Harry smiled, and she pushed her glasses. I think I have got the answer, Professor Snape, but I think I have no choice. Goodbye, Aunt Petunia. Goodbye, Dudley. Goodbye, Uncle Vernon. Harry laughed, drank the cup of warm milk in front of him that was originally Dudley, and then said, So, how do we get there? Don't you need to bring anything, like a change of clothes? I only have 3 clothes to change, and they are all very worn out. The girl scratched the back of her head a little embarrassedly when she said this, but her smile was still bright. The school should provide school uniforms, right? Snape nodded. He carried the suitcase, and Harry followed him out the door empty-handed. They came to a secluded corner of the community. Snape closed his eyes, calmed down and mobilized the magic power prepared by meditation in advance, and opened a portal. Behind the door was a place Harry had never been to. The streets were clean and tidy, and the shops with gorgeous decorations had large flashing signs. At this moment, Snape noticed that the girl was more embarrassed and uneasy than ever before. He stepped forward and walked into the portal, and stretched out a hand to signal the girl to hold on. Harry felt a strange tremor when he stepped through the portal, and just like that, they came to the commercial streets of London. I thought the place where wizards go would be a little weirder, Harry whispered with a forced smile. This is not a place for wizards. For some reason, he couldn't even say the word muggle, and instead used an uncommon word. This is where ordinary people buy clothes. Oh, Harry seemed a little uneasy, and Snape realized at this time that the girl's indifference and maturity beyond her age in the nightmare-like house just now were probably just a false self-protection. Harry pinched her wide and worn sleeves. She wanted to say something, but Snape just pulled her forward, his tone firm. In order to prevent you from causing some minor trouble to the image of Hogwarts, I think you need some new clothes, Ms. Potter. He looked up, not wanting Harry to see his expression. Therefore, he did not see Harry's expression. It was a distressing smile that contained gratitude and helplessness. They walked into a high-end clothing store. Men's clothing, women's clothing, children's clothing, everything. Snape said to the clerk in a jerky tone, "Please find some suitable clothes for this lady. Money is not a problem. 5 sets of summer and winter clothes, and I also need socks. Long socks, short socks, wool socks need about 10 pairs. In addition, please prepare 5 pairs of shoes." The female clerk looked at Snape's eyes as if they were shining. "Okay, sir." Harry pulled Snape's sleeve. She whispered, "Won't this be too expensive, Professor?" Snape glanced at her and tried to force a comforting smile on his face, but his degenerated facial muscles obviously couldn't make him make such a friendly expression, so his expression that looked more like a grimace than a smile made Harry burst out laughing. Snape turned his face away, and he muttered softly, "Okay, okay, this can be regarded as achieving the goal." 2 hours later, Harry, wearing a well-fitting black suit, walked out of Greenott's. She also changed into a new pair of glasses. Snape followed behind her, like a butler. The rest of Harry's clothes were packed in his black suitcase. Harry, who changed into a high-end custom-made suit, also cut her hair short. Her red hair was no longer messy, but cut into ear-length hair. She hummed a song that Snape didn't understand happily, and looked back at him from time to time, squinting and smiling. "It feels strange to be a rich man, Professor, but it's not as good as I found that everyone here seems to know me." She greeted a hunchbacked wizard in a black robe who passed by her, and the guy was full of surprise. Snape stared at him coldly until the guy ran away in disgrace. He followed Harry and chose his words carefully. "You are indeed famous." Harry had his back to Snape, so he could not see the girl's expression, but only heard her voice. "Really?" Snape walked forward and motioned the girl to follow him closely. "Originally, we still need to buy wizard robes and wands for you, teaching materials and a bunch of miscellaneous things, but this year we have a new way. These things can be left unpurchased." He took Harry to the door of a noisy pet store, pushed the door open and let Harry go in first. "But you must have a pet, an owl, a toad, or a cat." Harry wandered around the store, and the animals shrank when they saw her, as if they were afraid of something. The female owner of the pet store wanted to introduce her, but Snape just made a simple gesture, indicating that Harry should choose by herself. "I don't know, Professor. They all look a little scared of me." "It doesn't matter. You choose them, not them. Just pick the one you like." Snape answered the girl's question calmly. He took out a bunch of gold galleons from his briefcase and threw them to the female shopkeeper. Harry refused. She took out a handful of her own money from her pocket and smiled at Snape embarrassedly. "If you can, of course." Snape took back his gold galleons. Harry ran to the owls. The owls in the cages were of different colors, but they all turned their backs and didn't look at her. She ran to the toad display window. They didn't even make a sound. They looked motionless as if they were dead. The cats simply ran to various corners and hid. Harry turned around and gave Snape an apologetic smile. She thought it was her fault that these animals behaved so abnormally. "Sorry, Professor, it seems that they really don't like me, but it's okay. I've been like this since I was a child." Snape took the gold galleons from the reluctant hand of the female shopkeeper and put them in his trouser pocket. He pulled Harry out the door and asked, "So, do you have any favorite animals?" The girl tilted her head and thought about it under the gloomy London sky. Her red hair was so conspicuous. "Ah, snakes. Is it okay?" Snape pursed his lips and replied, "Usually not." The girl's eyes dimmed. He continued, "But I'm a professor, so it's okay." Chapter 11. My name is Harry Potter. Finally, Harry found the snake she wanted. They wandered around the dark corners of Diagon Alley for half an hour for this beautiful silver-gray little snake. Harry insisted that Snape not pay, and she finally spent 30 gold galleons to buy this snake that, according to the black-robed wizard, was rare blood, non-toxic and docile, and had the ability to foresee danger. It was now wrapped around Harry's right wrist, motionless. Snape's eyes were fixed on the snake. He had checked it and it was indeed non-toxic, but whether it was docile was debatable. It was wrapped around Harry's wrist as soon as they met, which seemed to have exceeded the scope of docility. In addition to these chores, Harry also showed a strong interest in playing, although Snape had no good feelings about this dirty place. But since Harry liked it, it was not impossible to go shopping. Harry bought 2 vanilla ice creams and gave one to Snape. The girl's eyes began to light up when she learned that the stall had this flavor. She said that the only ice cream she had ever eaten was this flavor. Snape frowned and licked a mouthful of vanilla ice cream. They sat on the seats outside the ice cream shop, and Harry looked at him expectantly. "Is it delicious, Professor?" He didn't know how to describe the taste, so he could only frown and try to express, "It's very strange. It's a little too sweet for me. You should eat more ice cream, Professor, or something sweet is also fine. These things will make you feel better, and you won't be so sad all the time." "Did I?" "Of course. When I saw you this morning, I thought you were a government agent from somewhere. Your expression looked so scary at the time." Snape was silent, although he didn't know what an agent was. It was obviously not a good word. He began to eat the ice cream quickly. Harry squinted and smiled. She finished her portion in 2 or 3 bites, and then raised her hand to indicate that she wanted another portion. A large one. Snape didn't ask for a second portion. He took out a ticket from his black suitcase. It said King's Road Railway Station Platform 9 3/4, and it was a ticket for September 1st. Snape handed the ticket to Harry and said, "It seems you need to stay here for 2 days. I will pick you up at the platform on September 1st. New students will take the Hogwarts Express to school. This is a tradition." Harry raised her face from the big bowl of vanilla ice cream, swallowed the ice cream in her mouth, and said, "Where should we stay?" "The Leaky Cauldron we just went to. I saw that there are accommodation services there." Snape suddenly fell silent again. He found that he couldn't let this child live in the Leaky Cauldron alone. He couldn't stand the thought of that scene. Snape simply said, "No, let's go to a high-end hotel for ordinary people." That night, Snape booked 2 rooms in a high-end hotel. His room was opposite Harry. When the clerk at the front desk asked in confusion why you and your daughter needed to book 2 rooms, Snape's face suddenly turned red and he couldn't even speak. Harry turned his back and laughed. They spent 2 happy days in London. 1 day in Diagon Alley and 1 day in a children's amusement park in London. The happy time passed in a flash. At 10:30 a.m. on September 1st, they appeared at King's Road Station on time. There were people coming and going here. Snape took Harry to the ticket barrier between Platform 9 and Platform 10, and he stopped to explain. "It's like this, Harry. This place is enchanted. I mean, ordinary people can't see this special platform. Wizards can't see it in most cases. But it does exist, so you just need to walk over." "What about you, Professor?" Harry held Snape's hand tightly and asked with her head raised. "You will see me at Hogwarts. During this time, you can get familiar with your future classmates, make new friends and so on," Snape said dryly, and then handed the black suitcase in his hand to Harry. The girl didn't show any emotion anymore. She took the suitcase with a smile, waved goodbye to Snape, and rushed into Platform 9 3/4. Snape was standing outside. A man passing by wiped his tears, looked at him, and actually came over and patted his shoulder. "Ah, man, I understand. It's not easy to send children away from home to study. Alas, I understand." His wife quickly pulled him away and gave Snape an apologetic smile. Snape stood expressionlessly in the crowded station. No one knew what he was thinking. A bright red steam locomotive was waiting to depart on a crowded platform. In the middle of the front of the locomotive, a sign clearly read Hogwarts Express, leaving at 11 o'clock. Harry turned around and found that the place where the ticket box was originally placed was now an iron gate with Platform 9 3/4 marked on it. It seems that what Professor Snape said is true. This second world is really amazing, Harry thought. Steam from the locomotive gathered above the heads of the chattering crowd, while cats of all colors circled around people's feet and shoes. Owls hooted at each other in an unpleasant way. Their calls drowned out the noise made by people dragging, pulling, patting and knocking heavy suitcases. The first few carriages were already full of students. Some of the students in the carriage leaned out of the window to chat with their relatives. While others were still fighting for seats, Harley formed a sharp contrast with those people pushing heavy suitcases. She swung the black suitcase in her hand lightly and casually and walked into the carriage. She found an empty carriage at the end of the train and sat in it. There was a smile on her face, not because she was calm, but to show others that she was not worried about this unfamiliar environment. A red-haired boy pushed the door of the carriage, pushed his big suitcase in with difficulty, and put it in a corner of the compartment. He glanced at Harley, looked away, and looked again. He seemed to have forgotten how to walk, and he walked stiffly to the seat opposite Harry and sat down. The boy tried to speak, coughing nervously. Ahem, cough. Hello. Harry stretched out his hand, and he was startled by the warm greeting. He became even more nervous, swallowing his saliva, and shook hands with Harry. My name is Ron Weasley. Harry Potter. Harry saw Ron's eyes suddenly widened. He now looked like a short-circuited robot. Harry laughed out loud. She said, "What's wrong? Why do all of you become like this when you hear my name?" You are that." Ron took a deep breath. He lowered his voice, as if Harry's name was some sacred word. "Harry Potter? Do I have to prove that I am Harry Potter?" Ron said something that made him want to turn back time immediately. "Yes, the scar on your forehead." "Oh my God, what did I say? Isn't this equivalent to exposing her scar?" "Ron Weasley, you are such an idiot." Ron thought desperately. He couldn't believe that he said this without thinking at all. But Harry was not angry. She just calmly pulled aside the red hair in front of her forehead so that Ron could see the lightning-shaped scar. "Oh my God." Ron stared at the scar, as if he had seen a miracle. "Do you remember anything? I mean, oh, forget it. Just pretend I didn't say anything." "I really asked a stupid question." Ron said another stupid thing that made him want to slap himself twice. He lay back in frustration. Very childish. Green light. Harry was not angry. She seemed to be indifferent to this somewhat offensive question and even laughed again. Her tone was flat, as if she was talking about something that had nothing to do with her. "I only remember a few green lights." Ron whispered, "I'm sorry, but that person has been arrested." "That person? Don't you know?" They stared at each other in the box. At this time, a girl in a brand new Hogwarts wizard robe pushed open the door of the box with a crying round-faced boy. Chapter 12. Being doused against the wall. "Excuse me, has anyone seen Neville's toad?" The girl who spoke had messy brown hair and big front teeth. No." Ron spread his hands awkwardly. "Sorry to bother you then." The girl was about to leave the carriage with Neville, but Ron suddenly had an urge to show off in front of Harry, so he said, "Wait, I might be able to help him find his toad." 5 minutes later, they watched Ron take out a broken and old wand from his box, and a mouse in the box squealed twice in dissatisfaction. Ron soothed, Okay, Scabbers. I didn't mean to wake you up. Go back to sleep." He wiped the sweat from his forehead. The girl and the crying boy called Neville also sat down. "Hermione Granger," the girl said. "Ron Weasley." Neville Longbottom. Neville's tone sounded like he wished he had never appeared. "Harry Potter." The air in the carriage was still for a moment, and Hermione said in surprise, "It's you. I just read about you in a book." "Really? What does the book say?" Harry asked calmly. Hermione wanted to answer immediately, but she stopped again, as if she realized that she was being a little blunt. However, she finally spoke hesitantly. "You are called the girl who survived because Voldemort learned a prophecy that you would kill him and end his dark rule, so he came to your house." Ron interrupted her quickly. Okay, I'm going to start casting a spell." Harry still looked very calm, but his left hand under the table was already clenched white. Ron raised his wand in a mysterious manner, cleared his throat, and muttered something that sounded more like a random fabrication than a spell. "Toad, come." There was no response. Hermione held her face and looked at the wand. She said, "Is this the wand?" But the notice issued this year clearly said that we no longer need wands. Ron tried again, and seeing no response, he threw the wand on the table in frustration. "Yes, but my mother still insisted that I bring it. She said it would be useful, but I don't know what it would be used for. Why don't I give it a try?" Harry picked up his wand and asked Neville, "What's your toad's name?" "Neville." Neville didn't even dare to look at Harry. Ron was very sure that he was about to faint, but he still spit out 2 words. Rive. Okay, let me try. She imitated Ron, raised the wand and shook it, and said in a firm tone without question, Rive. Come. A fiery red magic beam shot out from the top of the worn-out wand, and then disappeared. A toad flew over from outside the carriage at a very fast speed. It didn't seem to understand what was going on, and was held in Neville's arms. Wow! Ron and Hermione cried in surprise. Riff! Neville cried, hugging the toad tighter. Ron thought that this might be the reason why it ran away. Hermione praised sincerely, It seems that you are very talented, Harry. Maybe. Harry absent-mindedly returned the wand to Ron. The door of the compartment was knocked, and a salesperson with dimples on the corners of his mouth pushed open the compartment and asked them, Kids, do you want to buy something delicious? Harry was not hungry. Although Ron refused and said that he had brought sandwiches, his eyes clearly showed that he wanted to eat very much. Neville said nothing and was still immersed in his own world with the toad. Hermione politely said goodbye to them and the two left the compartment. So Harry simply said to the salesperson, Please give me some of each. Thank you. In Ron's surprise, they began to share these strange but delicious foods and chat. Harry learned about a series of magical creations such as Quidditch and wizard cards. Time passed quickly during the chat. At this moment, the door of the box was opened again, and a pale blonde boy walked in with two tall and strong boys behind him. He didn't even look at them, and introduced himself casually, I'm Draco Malfoy. These two are Crabbe and Goyle. Malfoy raised his head, and his eyes lit up when he saw Harry. But when he saw Ron, he chuckled. Oh, it turns out to be a Weasley. His deliberately elongated voice made people feel the mockery without looking at his expression, not to mention that his expression was an undisguised mockery. Ron's face flushed red, and he stood up. Crabbe and Goyle behind Malfoy also stepped forward, blocking Malfoy's view so that only his voice could be heard. What? You want to fight? Harry stood up slowly. She pushed Crabbe and Goyle away forcefully and extended a hand to the boy. Harry Potter. Ron was surprised to find that Malfoy's face quickly changed from pale to rosy. He walked up and shook Harry's hand. His originally arrogant attitude changed in an instant. Oh, Ms. Potter. Hello. But his attitude was obviously different for different people. Just like now, he turned to look at Ron and smiled like a winner. My father said that everyone in the Weasley family has red hair and freckles, and they have too many children to support. He turned to Harry again. But you will soon find out that there are good and bad magical families. We are not all like the Weasley family. I believe you don't want to make bad friends. In this regard, I can help you, Ms. Potter. Harry smiled and shook off his hand, pushed him against the door of the carriage, and his head hit it with a bang. Crabbe and Goyle seemed to have no idea what was going on and stood there. Ron's expression was even more dull. He looked like a nut wall. I have red hair too. Besides, I don't need anyone to tell me who I should be friends with. Mr. Malfoy, I hope you would be polite and not rush into my and my friend's compartment like a damn hooligan and disturb our relaxing time. Your arrogant attitude and tone will not add to your charm, but only make you look hateful. Harry's sharp words were like a knife. Ron could see that Malfoy wanted to get angry, but when he looked into Harry's eyes, he couldn't say anything. His eyes turned red and he sniffed. So you're going to start crying now? Harry said coldly. No, I'm not. I'm not crying. Malfoy cried and held back his tears. Harry suddenly laughed again, as if the person just now was not her. But her tone was still cold enough to freeze people to death. Leave here, okay? Malfoy left without saying a word, taking Crabbe and Goyle away. They even remembered to close the door. Ron could still hear his suppressed sobs outside the car. Harley sat back in her seat. She picked up a strange bin and threw it into her mouth. Her face wrinkled. Remind me not to eat this next time. God, it tastes as bad as spider legs. Ron stared at her blankly, his eyes fixed on her. He opened his mouth like a sculpture. Harley picked up a strange bin and threw it into his mouth. Ron chewed it subconsciously and said, Oh, it tastes like honey. Looks like you are lucky. Harley laughed. Ron seemed to have suddenly recovered from a short circuit. He jumped up from his seat and shouted excitedly, You were so cool just now. God. You pushed him against the car door. And Ron began to speak incoherently, and Harley smiled helplessly. She didn't want to tell this story. An orphan, a foster orphan, an orphan who was not valued and was often threatened to be sent to an orphanage. If she wanted to avoid being bullied in the community, she couldn't show any weakness. This was not even worth mentioning in her eyes. She had dealt with worse things than this. Make up for yesterday's overdue update. Chapter 13. First visit to Hogwarts. There were no more strange incidents along the way. Harry and Ron chatted all the way, and she learned a lot about the wizarding world. Ron also mentioned a young man named Shenyan, who was said to have caught Voldemort and changed the teaching methods of Hogwarts. There was a lot of talk about this outside, and no one had ever heard of him before. He and Dumbledore were on the headlines of the newspapers, Ron said slurringly while stuffing snacks into his mouth. Harry nodded thoughtfully. She was used to acting mature in front of her peers. She turned her head and looked out the window. Under the deep purple sky, she could still vaguely see the rolling mountains and dense forests, and the train seemed to have begun to slow down. Harry was still wearing the custom-made suit that Snape bought for her, and Ron had no intention of changing into a magic robe. He was wearing a jacket and jeans, and he looked nothing like the word wizard. A voice echoed in the carriage. "We will arrive at Hogwarts in 5 minutes. Please leave your luggage in the carriage. Someone will send your luggage to the school and batches." Harry and Ron grabbed the remaining candies and put them in their pockets. They squeezed into the crowded crowd in the corridor of the carriage. After a while of shaking, the car stopped. They finally squeezed out of the door and came to a small and dark platform. The cold wind was biting, and Harry shivered. She should have put on her coat earlier, she thought. A dim light jumped up and down above the students' heads, swaying from side to side. A loud voice shouted in the darkness, "First-year students, come here." A big hairy face appeared under the light. It was a tall giant with a thick beard. He held up the lantern and shouted, "First-year students, come, meet me." "Are there any more?" "Walk carefully. Follow me." The freshmen stumbled and followed the giant down a small, narrow road, which was very dark on both sides. Harry had a hunch that something was watching them in the dark. The silver-gray snake on her right wrist moved. Almost no one made a sound along the way, except for Neville, who lost his toad and was panting. The giant led the way in front, and his loud voice could be heard even by the students at the end of the team. "You will see Hogwarts soon. It will be there after turning this corner." They turned the corner. There was a loud exclamation from the crowd. The narrow path suddenly opened up, and a huge dark lake came into view. A huge castle with many turrets and towers was located between two steep mountains, and the glass of the windows sparkled under the starry sky. Harry fell in love with this place at first sight, and her heart was filled with an inexplicable throbbing. The giant stood in front of the road, pointed to a row of small boats on the shore and said, "Only 4 people can sit on a boat. Remember, freshmen, don't overload." Freshmen boarded the boats one after another. Harry, Ron, Neville and Hermione sat in one boat. The giant himself sat in a separate boat. He asked, "Are all of them on board? Are there any freshmen who haven't boarded yet?" After confirming again and again, he shouted, "Very good, let's go." The fleet of boats lined up set off at the same time, as if gliding together on the mirror-like lake. All the children were silent, looking up at the magnificent castle. As the fleet got closer and closer to the cliff where the castle was located, they even felt that the castle seemed to stand on their heads. Harry was almost obsessed with it. She had never experienced such an experience before. "Draw your heads." When the boat came to the edge of the cliff, the giant shouted loudly. They immediately bowed their heads. The boat carried them through a layer of ivy curtains on the surface of the cliff that covered the entrance, and moved along a black waterway that passed directly below the castle. After a long time, they finally arrived at an underground port. There, they got off the boat and began to climb up the mountain road full of rocks and pebbles. Guided by the giant's light, they continued to climb up along a passage between the shore rocks, and finally came to a wet and flat grassland under the shadow of the castle. They walked up a stone staircase and gathered in front of the heavy and wide oak door of the castle. There were exquisite reliefs on it, which actually glowed a little in the dark. The giant walked from the front of the team to the end, counting the number of people and asking if anyone was left behind. After doing all this, he raised his huge fist and knocked on the heavy door 3 times very hard. The door opened immediately, and a tall black-haired lady in a black robe stood at the door. Her expression was serious, and Ron whispered to Harry, "Her class should be difficult." Harry saw that the lady looked over here. She quickly smiled apologetically and elbowed Ron at the same time. "Professor McGonagall, all the first-year students are here," the giant reported to her. "Thank you, Hagrid. I'll take them in." It turned out that the giant's name was Hagrid. He turned and left. Harry turned his head to watch his back as he left. He seemed to be like a moving hill walking into the darkness. Professor McGonagall's voice rang out in front of the door. "Please follow me, children. Be careful not to crowd. There is plenty of space here." She was not lying. Professor McGonagall snapped her fingers, and many people exclaimed. Emerald green magic flowed from the lady's fingers, and she pushed the door completely open. The entrance hall and sign was surprisingly large. Harry thought it could even fit the entire house of her uncle's family. Torches illuminated the stone walls, the roof was unimaginably high, and the beautiful marble staircase in front led to the upper floors. They followed the lady through a floor covered with colorful flags. Harry could hear hundreds of noisy voices coming from the entrance on the right. Other students of the school had arrived, but Professor McGonagall took the new students to a small empty room away from the hall. They all squeezed in, standing closely together, looking around nervously. Starlight burst out from Professor McGonagall's hands, gathering and converging, and a warm fluorescence burst out on the ceiling of this small house. The freshman immediately felt the tension in his heart disappear, and the coldness he had just felt also disappeared. The older lady in black cleared her throat solemnly and said loudly, "Welcome to Hogwarts, children. The start of term dinner is about to begin, but before that, we have a ceremony to perform. You will be assigned to different colleges. There are 4 in total: Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw and Slytherin. Each college has its own glorious and long history. They have all nurtured talented wizards. During your time at Hogwarts, if you abide by the rules and behave well, your college will get extra points. Otherwise, points will be deducted. At the end of each year, the college with the highest score will receive a supreme honor, the House Cup. I hope you can all win glory for your college. The assignment ceremony will begin in front of the whole school in a few minutes. I suggest that you use this waiting time to dress yourself up." Her eyes swept across the faces of the freshmen, lingered for a while when passing by Harry, and nodded to her. Harry didn't know what this meant, but she returned a bright smile. It always doesn't hurt to be more respectful to those in power. She knew this. Professor McGonagall said again, "We will call you when we are ready. Just wait here quietly." After that, she left. Ron said to Harry anxiously, "I heard from my brother that this ceremony will be very painful, and there will be an exam." When he said this, his face turned pale. "When I think about taking the exam in front of so many people, He didn't say anything more. Harry looked around and found that everyone else was as nervous as Ron. Hermione was chattering with Neville in a low voice. Several people behind Harry suddenly screamed, and Ron jumped 3 feet high in fear. They turned their heads and found that there were at least 20 ghosts coming through the wall from behind. They were chatting, and the tone of their speech was difficult to understand. One of them flew down and looked at each of them carefully. These ghosts flew away quickly, as if they were in a hurry to do something. Professor McGonagall came back not long after, and she said, "Line up, children. Now follow me." They crossed the hall again, walked into a double door, and came to the Great Hall. Harry had never seen such a magnificent place. Even the high-end hotel where she stayed last night could not compare to this place. The other senior students were sitting at 4 long tables. Above their heads, there were thousands of candles floating in the air, illuminating the entire Great Hall. The tables were filled with glittering gold plates and goblets. There was another long table on the stage in front of the assembly hall, where the teachers were sitting. Professor McGonagall led the freshmen to the stage and asked them to stand in a row facing the senior students and with their backs to the teachers. Harry instinctively realized that something was going to happen. Chapter 14 Sorting Ceremony. The thousands of faces staring at them from the audience were like pale lanterns in the flickering candlelight. The ghosts scattered among the students made the originally blurry silverware shine. In order to avoid the gazes of the audience, Harry looked up and happened to see the beautiful black ceiling dotted with stars. She heard Hermione whisper in her ear, Someone has cast a spell on it to make it look more like the starry sky outside. This is what I learned from Hogwarts, a history of the school. I wish I could use this magic on the top of my ceiling. I don't want to see those spiders crawling around anymore, Harry thought. Professor McGonagall brought a four-cornered stool and put a white pointed hat on it. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the part in the middle of the hat that looked like a human face opened its mouth reluctantly. I wanted to sing a song, but I'm in a bad mood. New students, come here. Take me with you. I'll tell you which college you should go to, it shouted harshly. Professor McGonagall stood aside with a long roll of parchment in her hand and said, "When I read your name, please put on this hat and sit down to wait for it to be assigned," she shouted. Hannah Abbott, a pink-faced, blonde girl, walked out of the line, put on a hat that was so big that it covered her eyes, and sat down quietly. After a while, the hat shouted, "Hufflepuff." The Hufflepuff students sat at the far right. When Hannah came down and sat with them, they all applauded and cheered, and even a fat ghost waved to her. Professor McGonagall continued to read the names, and the students in the house where the students were assigned began to applaud. Ron became more and more nervous because there were only a few people left to be assigned. Even Hermione and Malfoy went up. Hermione went to Gryffindor, and Malfoy seemed to have forgotten what happened on the train. He was assigned to Slytherin with a proud face, but his eyes did not look at Harry, and I don't know if he dared or was unwilling. Harry was also nervous, but Professor Snape, who led her away from Dudley's house, was watching her from behind, so her nervousness was somewhat reduced. Moreover, Professor Snape also told her some things about the sorting ceremony. She just silently waited for her name to be called by Professor McGonagall. Harry Potter. This name made the hall silent for a moment, and then loud voices broke out, like a boiling pot. People were talking about it. Is it the Potter I was thinking of? Is it the Harry Potter? Oh my God, she is so beautiful, and that dress, I want to buy one too. You may not be able to afford it, buddy. That dress looks custom made. Harry thought she was prepared, but she was not. It was inevitable to be a little nervous at this time. She stroked the little snake on her right wrist, walked to the hat stiffly and expressionlessly, put it on, and then sat down. "You," the voice of the hat echoed in her mind. "Girl, you are very talented. You are also thirsty for knowledge. You are even brave. You also want to prove your worth. Oh, this is getting interesting. You can go to all 4 colleges." Harry asked in his mind. "So, where do you think I should go, Mr. Hat?" The sorting hat was silent for a while, and it said, "You don't look panicked at all." "So," it shouted to the crowd, "Slytherin." Snape waved his fist vigorously, but he soon coughed again and turned back to his serious appearance. Harry walked towards the Slytherin table. The group of students in green robes looked crazy at this time, but when Harry walked over with a blank expression, they bowed their heads to greet him. Little did she know that her mind was in chaos. "Why are they bowing to me?" Draco Malfoy no longer looked arrogant. He seemed to want to shrink under the table. Harry noticed him and came over to sit with him. Malfoy tried his best to act like he was not afraid of him at all, but he did not even dare to look at Harry from the side. He just looked down at his plate, as if there were gold and silver treasures in it. The sorting ceremony was completely over after a few minutes. Ron, Hermione, and Neville all went to Gryffindor. Harry was alone in Slytherin. She was a little depressed about this. A tall old man with white hair and beard stood up from the teacher's seat. He cleared his throat. Harry noticed that he was Dumbledore, the greatest white wizard in the world printed on the collection card, and the headmaster of Hogwarts. He said in a loud voice, "Welcome, welcome to Hogwarts. This is a new school year, and it is also a brand new beginning for Hogwarts, because this year, we will adopt an unprecedented, brand new teaching method. You will learn the true secrets of magic. Next, please allow me to take a little time. I want to announce something," he added. "Due to the change in teaching methods, the freshmen will be taught by Professor Shenyan next to me. I believe many of you have seen him in the newspaper. And all students from the second year and above, please pay attention to the bulletin board in your common room. I must remind you that there are some small changes in the curriculum." He sat down. The young man on his right stood up and nodded to everyone. Harry noticed that when he stood up, many female students gave a low exclamation, and she herself was a little surprised at the man's unimaginable handsomeness. But compared to that face, what makes people feel more attractive is his eyes. Like a whirlpool, as long as you look at them, you can't help but want to indulge in it. The man coughed lightly, then said, "I don't want to delay everyone's dinner time. I'm afraid some of you are already hungry." His little joke made the students laugh softly, and made them feel a little relieved. At least this professor is not so strict, and they will feel better. As Professor Dumbledore said, "Freshmen, please arrive at the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom on the 4th floor before 9:30 tomorrow morning to prepare for class." That's it. He finished speaking briefly, and sat down with a smile. Harry heard people at the Slytherin table talking quietly. Dumbledore smiled and waved his arms downwards from his seat, and countless delicious foods suddenly appeared on those empty plates. "Everything is included." Harry's eyes lit up when she saw the vanilla ice cream, but she also saw the roast chicken, steak and rows of sausages. It is always difficult to choose, especially to choose between these foods that she has not eaten much before. After the dinner, Harry realized that she might have eaten too much. In fact, it is not possible. She ate 3 vanilla ice creams, 2 steaks, a large dollop of mashed potatoes, and even finished half a fish. Malfoy, who was sitting next to her, didn't eat much. He watched Harry trembling with fear as she quickly devoured the food with an expressionless face and the speed of a war. The way she waved her knife and fork might have seemed to Malfoy like she was waving it at herself. His appearance made Harry roll his eyes at him. Dumbledore stood up again and said, "Now that everyone has eaten and drunk enough, I will say a few more words. I hope you don't find me, an old man, annoying. I'm sure you have noticed that there is no dress code this year. Therefore, it doesn't matter whether you wear a robe or a jacket. But there are still a few rules. For example, students are strictly prohibited from entering the Forbidden Forest on the playground. Please keep this in mind. At the same time, the administrator Mr. Filch wants me to remind you not to cast spells in the corridor during class breaks, and night walks are prohibited. The original courses and exams for senior students will no longer be held. As for why, you should understand it after you finish Professor He's class tomorrow. I'm done. Thank you all for listening to me patiently." At the long table in Gryffindor, 2 red-haired boys wailed, "No, Headmaster, where is the school song this year?" Dumbledore laughed, and he said happily, "If you want, you can stay and sing by yourself. I will start for you. Choose a tune you like, but I'm afraid I have something to do and I have to leave now." After saying this, he waved his hand, and a piece of music started. The 2 boys began to sing, and then everyone started to sing along. Amid this chaotic chorus, Dumbledore left the hall. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15 First Lesson. He walked all the way to the conference room, where 11 members of the school board were waiting. Lucius Malfoy, who was absent, was said to be resting at home due to illness and would not see anyone. Dumbledore pushed open the door, and before he sat down, one of the men with a big belly immediately spoke rudely. "I heard that you changed the teaching method of Hogwarts, Dumbledore, but you didn't say in the news you gave to the newspaper that you would teach students in a completely new way, without using wands to cast spells, without using cauldrons to teach them to brew potions, and even no longer teach the previous courses. What's going on?" As I said, this is a completely new way of casting spells, the real secret of magic." Dumbledore sat down and explained with a smile. "Ridiculous. Isn't what we learned before magic?" the man asked aggressively. "In fact, you can think so." Dumbledore was still smiling, but his tone was firm. This sentence made the atmosphere in the conference room weird. The man's face flushed red, and he stood up. His round belly made his robes bulge out in a circle. Shaking up and down, he panted heavily. "You must be so old that you've lost your mind. For thousands of years, wizards have been using wands to cast spells, and now you're promoting a new method that no one has ever heard of, canceling all the previous courses, and brazenly saying that this is the real secret of magic?" Another member of the board of directors, A woman in a dark purple robe also echoed, "Yes, Dumbledore, even if it's true as you said, when those students go out, without certificates and corresponding spell knowledge, how can they find a job to support themselves?" She blinked meaningfully. "People send their children to Hogwarts not only to let them learn magic, but also to let them learn skills to make a living. You don't have to worry about this." Dumbledore nodded to the woman, and his smile gradually disappeared. He replied calmly, "I will show you." "Show what?" the man asked. Dumbledore clasped his hands together, and mobilized the magic power that he had prepared long ago. The white light illuminated the entire conference room. The 12 school directors fell asleep in an instant. Dumbledore stood up while humming happily. He was too lazy to explain to them, so he simply used the new magic he learned to let them experience it themselves. He walked to the door of the conference room, considerately turned up the temperature here, then extinguished the candle and closed the door. "Oh, if I were not the headmaster, I really wish I didn't have to spend time dealing with them. I've only read half of the book I finished 2 days ago." Dumbledore thought with some distress, and he was ready to return to his lost office. And those sleeping school directors seemed not worth worrying about in his eyes. He was as sure that they would agree with him after they woke up. Thinking of this, he smiled. Of course they would agree. Harry woke up at 8 o'clock. The Slytherin dormitory was located underground, to be precise. It was at the bottom of the lake. They could see the aquatic creatures swimming in the lake through the window. Under the green light in the room, there was a dark and mysterious atmosphere. The prefect said that originally a password was required to enter the common room, but this year this rule was cancelled for some reason. Harry lived alone and had no roommates. It was said that other girls wanted to be her roommates and they quarreled. She had no opinion on this. In fact, she was too lazy to deal with them. "I hate green." She looked at the green curtains beside her bed and said faintly, "After dinner." She began to wander around the castle. The defense against the dark arts classroom on the 4th floor was not difficult to find. She pushed open the door and entered. It was spacious and bright here, with tables and chairs arranged in a staircase. A large silver chandelier hung from the ceiling. Harry saw that many freshmen had already sat down in advance. She did not choose to sit with her college students, but searched in the crowd. She found Ron. He was dozing on the table in the back 2 rows of the classroom. Harry walked all the way to sit next to him. He didn't notice it at this time because he was dozing on the table. Harry patted him and Ron jumped up immediately. When he found out it was Harry, his expression was complicated. Harry, I mean, good morning." Harry didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "What's wrong with you?" "I thought we were friends." She deliberately pretended to be sad. Ron's face flushed again. He rubbed his face and said hurriedly, "That's not what I meant." But you are from Slytherin." "I'm Gryffindor, so, He danced with his hands and tried his best to explain, but Harry just smiled and said, "So?" Ron was infected by her attitude and shrugged. "I guess it's nothing. You don't look like a typical Slytherin. My brothers say that Slytherin people are guys with their eyes on the top of their heads and never look you in the eye." Harry raised his eyebrows. "Watch out." "You said this in front of a Slytherin." They started chatting again, and the previous little embarrassment disappeared in the blink of an eye. Then, Hermione came. She walked over to sit next to them. She didn't seem to realize Harry was a Slytherin at all, and greeted Harry cheerfully. This made Ron feel a little uncomfortable again. As all the freshmen arrived, the noise in the classroom became louder and louder, until their new professor, Mr. Ho, who was famous for catching Voldemort, walked in. He walked into the classroom with the cold wind from the corridor outside, and the freshmen suddenly became quiet. He walked up to the podium and looked around. The parchment scroll on the podium flew out of thin air, and began to call the roll with a loud voice. 5 minutes later, he spoke. "I'm glad to see that no one is late. My name is Shenyan. You can call me Professor He or Mr. He. This is a brand new course, and it is also the key for you to knock on the door of real magic. I won't ask you to take it seriously, because learning is your own business. But I hope you understand that it is very painful to watch others holding the key to truth and stepping into the door of truth while you are blocked outside. Especially, you have the opportunity to enter that door like them." He narrated calmly, without any emotion. but everyone held their breath and listened carefully to every word he said. "Next, I will distribute the textbooks. Please note that this book was written by me personally. It is made of special materials and cannot be bought outside. So if you damage or lose it, don't be afraid, just come to me to replace it. My office is the third room on the right on the second floor. If you don't understand anything, you are always welcome to ask me." After he finished speaking, a not-so-thick book appeared on everyone's desk. It had a brown cover and was written with basic theory of magic. Then, it opened to the first page without wind. "Please read the first page carefully. I will start asking questions in 15 minutes. You can discuss and exchange ideas, but please be careful with your volume." After saying this, he went out, leaving the freshman reading quietly. Harley looked at the preface carefully, and she said to herself, "To learn magic, you must first understand the nature of magic. People are born with magic to a certain extent, and this magical power is stored in the brain. Different individuals have different amounts of magic. If you find that you don't have much magic after learning meditation," page 45 of this book, "don't be discouraged. These can be changed through acquired efforts. There are no shortcuts or tricks in the way of magic. You can only solve problems with your own efforts, seriousness, and your intelligence. The most important thing is to be serious." She soon became addicted to the book. The first page was only a few hundred words, but it introduced in great detail the origin of magic, the connection between the body, soul and will, and how magic is used. It was not until Professor He came in again that she realized that 15 minutes had passed so quickly. Chapter 16 Slytherin plus 5 points. "Has everyone finished reading?" he asked. "Very good. Then, I will start asking questions. Please note that you do not need to raise your hand to indicate that you want to answer this question, because everyone will be asked this question at least 3 times this semester. Please be prepared." He stood on the podium with his hands behind his back, and his long black hair was tied into a ponytail at the back of his head. Shenyan said, "Please ask Mr. Draco Malfoy to stand up." Harry turned his head and saw Malfoy standing up with a pale face. "Please tell me, can the total amount of magic power be improved through acquired efforts?" Shenyan asked slowly, and Malfoy swallowed his saliva. His voice was not loud and there was a sense of weakness. "Yes, Professor, I think it can." Harry saw a smile on the professor's face. "Not bad. 5 points for Slytherin. Please sit down." Malfoy sat down with a sigh of relief. For some reason, he always felt a pressure when facing this young new professor, so great that he felt instinctively in awe. "Mr. Malfoy is right. The total amount of magic power can be improved through acquired efforts. In about a week, I will tell you how to meditate. If you find that there are more students around you than you, please don't be discouraged, and don't think that you have no talent and want to give up. Remember, the amount of magic power is not the criterion for determining whether you are a qualified wizard." Shenyan continued, "Mr. Ron Weasley, please stand up." Ron stood up quickly, and his knee even hit the table with a bang, but he didn't cry out in pain. Everyone could see that he was nervous, but no one laughed at him, not even Malfoy. This new professor seemed to have the ability to make everyone unconsciously serious. Harry heard Professor He ask, "Please tell me about the process of casting a spell?" Ron stammered, Use spirit and will to drive magic, use imagination to build a spell model, and finally use magic to release the spell model." "Is that right, Professor?" "Very good. 5 points for Gryffindor." "Please sit down, Mr. Weasley. I have a few points to add, and I hope you will write them down." "Oh, I noticed that many of you didn't bring notebooks. This is my problem. I forgot to remind you." "Sorry." He snapped his fingers, and everyone got a pen and a black craft paper book. After they all picked up their pens and prepared to start recording, Shenyan spoke again. "I wrote this process in great detail, so you may find it a little difficult to understand. But it's actually very simple. It's a natural thing for wizards." "How many of you have changed something around you because of your emotions?" Many people raised their hands. "That's right. At that moment, your strong emotions drove the magic and made it do what you imagined. The essence of spellcasting is to use will to influence the real world." Please write this sentence down. It will be used in the exam. Also, please don't write irrelevant content in your notebook. I will conduct a spot check at the end of the semester, which is also related to your total score. If you fail, you will be held back." The students took a breath of cold air, and Shenyan smiled. Who didn't come from the student days? This class lasted from 9:30 to 12 o'clock and ended directly. They were going to lunch in 2s and 3s. Ron told Harry about the professor's teaching style. "Oh my god, he is so strict, isn't he? I never thought he would give us so many rules right from the start," Hermione said on the side. "A lot." "I think it's okay, and he is actually very responsible. He gave you notebooks when you didn't bring them." When she said this, she waved her hand proudly, indicating that she brought a notebook. Harry nodded. "I was already looking forward to meditation, but when I turned to page 45, the words on it were blurred. There was only one clear sentence: 'Please wait for the progress of the course, and do not try to meditate on your own.'" Ron looked at her in shock. "You actually read the rest of the content?" "I couldn't stand it after reading the first 3 pages. Too much theory." Harry and Hermione looked at each other, and then they agreed that Ron might be allergic to reading. During lunch, they heard many senior students complain that the new courses were too difficult, and it was unimaginable to completely abandon the wand to cast spells. Ron thought, "It's okay." Harry was cutting the steak on the plate. She asked, "What's okay?" "Fortunately, my wand is my brother's leftover, so I don't feel bad even if I throw it away." He laughed. Hermione rolled her eyes and pointed out a problem bluntly. "If even senior students think the course is too difficult, then you should consider whether we will fail the exam." The originally cheerful atmosphere was frozen with Hermione's words. Many freshmen at their long table heard Hermione's words, and their expressions became as sad as the senior students. Ron looked ahead with a dull look after Hermione's words, as if he had seen himself failing the exam. Harry shook his head, finished his steak, and took another vanilla ice cream to eat. This heavy atmosphere became more obvious during dinner that day. Every student had a solemn look on his face. Many people actually brought basic theory of magic to the auditorium to read while eating, and were very careful not to let the soup splash on it. Professor McGonagall looked at the scene in disbelief. She whispered to Flitwick beside her, "Merlin, what's going on?" The short professor smiled and said, "Minerva, whatever the situation is, I'm glad to see that their vigorous energy is used in the right way. Besides, we were like this a month ago, weren't we?" Snape's eyes moved back and forth between his plate and the Slytherin table. He ate the food in his bowl without saying a word, and then left. He came to his office on the first floor underground. The original potion classroom would obviously not be used again this year. However, he learned from Mr. He that potion science was still an important subject in their world, but it was slightly different from what wizards mastered. He was looking forward to the day when he would learn new potions. He lit up his fireplace, which he had not used for a long time, and put all the glass jars with strange things on the shelf into a large box with magic. He also cleaned the dust on the ground. The walls were dim and lightless. He frowned when he saw it. He used a simple spell, luminescence. This is a basic spell that is somewhat similar to luminescence, but completely different. It releases a long-lasting light source that can be fixed, shaped, and can be lit or extinguished according to the will of the releaser. A ball of light emitting soft warm light floated on the ceiling, filling the room with warm light. After doing all this, he tidied his clothes and hair and sat in his chair. He took out some documents and pretended to be busy. In fact, he didn't even touch the pen. After a while, there was a knock on his office door. Snape straightened his back and tried hard to keep his voice from fluctuating. "Come in." A red-haired girl pushed the door open and walked in. She put her hands behind her back, walked all the way to Snape, and handed him a vanilla ice cream. "For you, Professor. I noticed that you didn't eat dessert today," Harry said with a smile. "Thank you." Snape stared at the ice cream in a daze, and he took it and took a bite. "Very good. 5 points for Slytherin," he said calmly. Chapter 17 Ordinary Daily Life and Exam Notice. It was an ordinary Saturday afternoon not long after the start of school. "She is very talented." Snape was marking Harry's homework. He wrote a big O, which means outstanding. Shenyan was sitting next to him. He was also marking homework, but it was Snape's. He was much more ruthless. "Yes, and I worked harder than you." Mr. Snape, I don't know if you have checked your paper. When you discuss the difference between portals and apparitions, you wrote the two oppositely. This is a very low-level mistake. Snape was silent for a while and said, I'm very sorry, Professor. He remembered the vanilla ice cream that Harry brought him after dinner that day. It tasted really good. In just a short while, he was distracted again. It's okay, Harry, you just need to wait for a while. Snape sat up straight and continued to work. Shenyan put his homework aside and picked up Dumbledore's to read. At this time, not only students have to study in Hogwarts, but also teachers. They teach students from Monday to Friday, and have to listen to Shenyan's lectures on Saturdays and Sundays. They are very conscientious, but no one has any complaints about it. If life is fulfilling, there will not be too many complaints. Compared with Snape, Harry's life is much easier. After class, she either hangs out in the library with Hermione, or runs around and plays with Ron in the playground. Senior students play Quidditch, but freshmen don't have the opportunity to take Quidditch classes this year, so sometimes they run to watch the senior students play. Ron's twin brothers often laughed at him for this matter until they saw Harry with Ron. At that moment, their expressions made Ron laugh for 3 whole days. He wanted to laugh when he thought about it, and often laughed out loud during meals, causing many people to think he was crazy. Ron just explained, you just didn't see their expressions. The mixture of shock, reluctance, and envy, the look of wanting to come over and play together but not daring to, was really funny. Then he was pranked by his 2 brothers for a whole week. Harry was very famous in Hogwarts, not only because of her weird title of the girl who lived, but also because of her outstanding appearance. Harry herself seemed to be unaware of this. Hogwarts now has no dress code requirements. She often walks around in a tailored black suit or casual jacket, and her red hair is as dazzling as a flame. It is said that someone wrote her a love letter and asked her to read it in public. The guy was punished by Snape to clean the abandoned potions classroom for 2 weeks. The wailing sound made the passing students think that some ghost was haunting it. Dumbledore was much more relaxed than other faculty members. The board of directors never came to make trouble again. He basically didn't teach, and even if he occasionally taught, he was a substitute. Most of the time he was studying the book Basic Spells given to him by Shenyan. The book was ridiculously thick, and although the title was Basic Spells, the content was completely unrelated to the basics in Dumbledore's opinion. He filled 3 brown paper notebooks with writing, and had to go to Shenyan's office 4 or 5 times a day, and most of the time it was late at night. But no matter when he went, Shenyan would patiently answer his questions. Moreover, Dumbledore had never seen him sleep. In addition to studying, he had to take 1 day a week to visit Voldemort, who was left with only a skin, in Azkaban. Dumbledore was reluctant to elaborate on his detailed situation. However, his mood was visibly getting better every day. Snape asked privately, and the annoying old man just told him with a pleasant smile, "Oh, don't worry, my dear Severus, you only need to supervise Miss Potter to continue to study hard, and you don't need to worry about other things." He also winked playfully when he said this, and Snape felt a little itchy every time he thought of this. When people concentrate on something, time usually passes very quickly. The 1.5-hour class passed in a flash. Harry bit her pen and didn't choose to move even after class. She was frowning because of a paragraph on the blackboard. Malfoy, who was sitting behind her, looked at the back of her head with a dull expression, not realizing that he looked like an idiot at the moment. Hermione was copying Harry's notes frantically next to her. The speed was so fast that Ron, who was standing next to her, almost thought she had cast a spell on her pen. Ron looked at his notebook. He basically only wrote 3 paragraphs in the whole class. The boy wailed in his heart, but his face remained calm. He also looked up at the blackboard like Harry. He knew every word, but he couldn't recognize them when they were combined. 20 minutes later, he saw the young professor walk into the classroom and tap the podium with his fingers expressionlessly. The sound was not loud, but all the noise disappeared. Shenyan said, "I think it is necessary to inform you that the Christmas holiday is coming soon. Before the holiday, I will give you a test. If you have been serious enough in class before, this test can be said to be very simple. If you are not sure, You can also take this opportunity to ask me, or ask other students you think have learned well." He paused, and was satisfied to see the horrified expression he wanted. He smiled and said, "Those who pass the test will get a small gift from me. And if you don't pass, don't be too nervous. We will see each other in January." Ron could no longer hear the professor's voice. The word exam echoed in his mind. From the left brain to the right brain, a chill rose from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. He didn't listen to anything in this class. Ron walked to the cafeteria in a daze, holding his books and notebooks. He looked like a moving corpse. Harry called him twice from behind, but he didn't respond. Harry had no choice but to step forward and pat him on the shoulder. Ron turned around with a look of death. Hermione, who was standing beside Harry, screamed in fear. The scream also startled Ron, and his notebook fell to the ground. It happened to be opened, revealing the notes that were basically the same as a blank piece of paper. "Now I know why you have that expression." Harry looked at him and nodded slowly. Ron picked up the notebook. His mind was now full of what he would look like after failing the exam. Fred and George would definitely know, and they would definitely tell their mother, and maybe Ginny would know too. "Oh my God, I'm so stupid. If they know, wouldn't that mean everyone would know?" Then I would be the only Weasley who failed the exam on the first try. But, for some reason, compared to the images in his mind, he seemed to be more afraid of disappointing Professor Ron walked away by himself. Harry and Hermione stood where they were. The disheveled girl said worriedly, "He looks terrible, Harry." "Yeah, but we can't seem to help him. Since the beginning of the semester, the professor has reminded us to study hard before every class. If he doesn't want to study, there's nothing we can do. The most I can do is lend him my notes, but I don't know if he's willing to read them." Harry lifted the red hair from her ear in distress. Malfoy sneaked away from her, and the two followers who were once inseparable were nowhere to be seen. "Does he really think we can't find him following you?" Hermione asked Harry with a frown as she watched the guy leave the corridor. The red-haired girl just shrugged indifferently, and then pulled Hermione towards the library. Chapter 18. Didn't you go to the office to ask the teacher? At 7 o'clock that evening, Shenyan was marking students' new assignments in his office. He was quite satisfied with this batch of assignments. The basic theory of meditation had been submitted, and most people had good feedback on their assignments. It seemed that he could start to let them do their first meditation. He was immersed in his own thoughts, and the firewood in the fireplace beside him crackled. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts, and he said, "Come in." A red-haired boy poked his head out of the door, and he looked very nervous. Shenyan stood up and motioned the boy to come in. He recognized that this was Ron Weasley among the freshmen, a boy with some talent, but very inattentive in class. Ron was getting more and more frightened by his expressionless face at this time, thinking that he had interrupted some of the professor's work. He was about to open his mouth to find an excuse to leave, but Shenyan pressed him and made him sit on a soft chair in front of the desk. "Mr. Weasley, what can I do for you?" He sat down again, his black eyes staring at Ron. Ron swallowed his saliva and said nervously, Professor, no, I'm very sorry if I disturbed you, but I just want to ask some questions, okay?" Shenyan raised his eyebrows, and this ambiguous expression made Ron sweat coldly. He just couldn't get along with this professor in a normal way, and always had an inexplicable awe. But Shenyan suddenly smiled and said, "Very good. You are the second student who has the courage to come to me to ask questions this semester. Come on, Mr. Weasley, what questions do you want to ask?" Ron's nervousness still did not decrease. He asked, "This is it, Professor. I was distracted in your class 4 days ago. I didn't listen to the basic application of mental power at all, and I couldn't understand other people's notes." He avoided, not daring to look at Shenyan's face, for fear that his face would show a disappointed expression. However, he only heard a calm voice, "Please write down every word I say next, Mr. Weasley. Do you remember the essence of spellcasting? Use your will to influence the real world?" "Yes, but how do you influence it?" "If human will can really control the powerful laws of reality so easily, then the world will not be what we see. This depends on mental power. When you succeed in your first meditation, You can mobilize magic power in a comfortable way. And what is needed to mobilize magic power is mental power. The warm flames in the fireplace crackled, and the red-haired boy, who dared not look up, lay on the professor's desk and wrote furiously. His professor leaned back in his chair and gave him a lesson he had already taken. There was no impatience at all. So, this is where you have been buying wands? Shenyan looked at the shabby shop in front of him with some novelty. The shop was small and shabby, and the golden sign on the door had peeled off, and it read, Ollivander, making fine wands since 382 BC. In the shop window, a solitary wand was placed on a faded purple cushion, looking very shabby. Not only that, the shop was also very small, with nothing but a bench in the corner. Thousands of narrow paper boxes containing wands were piled from floor to ceiling, and a thin layer of dust fell everywhere. Dumbledore led him in with a smile, and he greeted a silver-haired, silver-eyed, and somewhat crazy old man. Ollivander. The old man looked up from the broken wand in front of him. He showed a pleasant smile, wiped his hands on his clothes again, and shook hands with Dumbledore. Hello, Mr. Dumbledore. Are you bringing this gentleman to buy a wand? No. Shenyan shook his head. He said bluntly, actually, I'm here to try making a wand. The enthusiastic smile on Ollivander's face turned into an awkward one. He looked at Dumbledore, but Dumbledore just calmly motioned him to listen. The old man had no choice but to do as he was told. Shenyan waved his hand at a box on the shelf closest to him, and the dusty box opened by itself, and a plain black wand flew out. He took it in his hand and looked at it, and said, Ebony, 9.5 inches, dragon's heart. Am I right? He suddenly sighed and apologized. I'm sorry that I was so rude just now. I just couldn't bear to see these materials being ruined like this. They could have been more magnificent and outstanding. Like this. A light suddenly lit up in his hand, and Ollivander was shocked to see that the wand he made with his own hands softened and deformed in just a moment, and the dragon's heart was pulled out intact. The strong heart that he had soaked in the family potion was burned by the fire that the young man summoned from nowhere, and it actually glowed with a silver luster. He summoned a green flame again, and the brief glimpse made Ollivander terrified. The green flame disappeared in the blink of an eye, and the dragon's heart turned and lost its light again, floating in the air like those materials that Ollivander had failed to handle, lifeless. Shenyan moved his fingers slightly, and a green magic circle emerged out of thin air, imprinted on the ebony and turned into a mysterious and beautiful pattern. Then it was reshaped in the white light, and turned into the shape of a cane in a situation where matter was not conserved. The dragon's heart turned into a ray of light and flew into the cane. The head of the cane twisted and turned into a dragon head with closed eyes. This was not over yet. He even used magic power on his fingers to form a sharp carving knife, and began to carve the dragon's eyeballs bit by bit, meticulously. Not only that, Ollivander also found that when he did this, the wooden dragon head actually opened its eyes and allowed him to carve 2 miniature magic circles on each eyeball, glowing with powerful magical aura. The old man didn't understand what he was doing at all, but he was shocked. Shenyan handed him the cane. Try my work. 31 4 inches. The material remains the same, but after a special enchantment, there are some minor changes. Ollivander was speechless at this time. He took the cane with trembling hands. It was warm to the touch, and then a burning sensation emerged. He held the head of the cane and actually felt the cane trembling slightly, as if it was breathing. The old man who had been making wands for a lifetime put everything behind him at this moment, and he couldn't help but smile. The magic power poured into the wand from his hand. The casting experience was smoother than his own wand, which made him feel like a rejuvenated child at that moment. He shouted, Lumos. That day, the sky of Diagon Alley was bright for half the night. Chapter 19 About the Past. During lunch break, Shenyan finished his sandwich. He wiped his mouth and picked up the newspaper that the house elf had prepared for him and put aside to read. The headline was a moving magic photo. Ollivander was holding up the dragon-headed cane with a bright smile. The title was written in bold black cursive, Master Ollivander's new work, The Revolution of the Magic Wand. He read the report carefully and it was as he expected. The author praised Ollivander in the article and wanted to compare him with Dumbledore. The cane was even said to be a treasure comparable to myths and legends. Shenyan shook his head with a smile. He wanted to completely reform this corrupt magic world controlled by pure-blood families, and he didn't want to shed too much blood, so handing over part of his achievements to others was the only way. Of course, he could wave his hand and let these families turn into ashes in the wind, or make them his puppets. But that would be meaningless. He didn't want to be a magic tyrant or a false god. Thinking of this, Shenyan fell into memories for the first time in a long time. Strange was reading a book with great interest. He did not like to let the book float in the air and turn the pages by himself like other wizards. He was a more traditional person in this regard. He thought that holding a book and turning the pages had irreplaceable significance. Call it a quirk, but wizards have some quirks more or less. Speaking of wizards, he touched his beard and thought of his senior brother. In his eyes, Shenyan was the strongest wizard in the world. No one else. He might not even be as good as Ancient One. Before Shenyan appeared, all wizards in the world had to pay a price to the dimensional demon god when casting spells, because this magical power is not innate, but a debt. That's what they said. Until Shenyan discovered that magic power actually exists in everyone's body, not a debt as the dimensional demon god said. This means that mortals have been deceived for thousands of years. This discovery directly broke the existing spellcasting system. Knowledge is still knowledge, and magic is still magic, but there is no need to pay a price anymore, because the magic power belongs to you. If you use your own things, there is no question of borrowing. But the dimensional demons didn't think so. When the gods are angry, it's always the mortals who bear the price. They united and launched a war against the mortal world. Countless people died directly or indirectly, and even the Ancient One was seriously injured. They had no choice. The Ancient One took out the time stone in the Eye of Agamotto and used his soul as the price to drive it to reverse time. The collapsed building returned to its original state, the cracked ground closed again, and the dead people were resurrected together. Only the Ancient One paid all the costs, and she died on the spot. The soul was annihilated and the body was broken. The time stone also disappeared, leaving only the Eye of Agamotto, the symbol of the Supreme Sorcerer. To Strange, this treasure once allowed the Supreme Sorcerer to cross time, and it was just a piece of cake to go back in time. But now, it can only watch the various possibilities of the future timeline. Their losses were heavy. Although the dimensional demons no longer interfered with this world, they took back all their influence. However, the sudden death of the Supreme Sorcerer also made countless invaders in the universe set their sights on this planet. Most of the unknown wars took place in the hidden corners of the universe or the Earth. Fortunately, they finally won, and the names of Shenyan and Strange spread throughout the universe after Ancient One. However, Shenyan was mostly notorious. He was fearfully called the Butcher's Knife of the Supreme Sorcerer, the Unspeakable Black, and the Skrull Butcher by those aliens. The most representative title was the Skrull Butcher. The incident originated from the Skrulls' invasion of the Earth. Shenyan accidentally discovered that they were infiltrating the Earth with pervasive disguises. At the same time, they were also kidnapping and dissecting to study the physiological structure of the Earthlings. After the furious wizard raided a Skrull facility in Nevada, he saw 100 bodies of all kinds of men, women, young and old. Most of them were torn apart beyond recognition. So, he went to the Skrull Empire alone. As long as it was an area controlled by the Skrulls, he would carry out the same pervasive assassination. After killing the local highest official and paralyzing the messenger agency, he would carry out an extremely cruel massacre. First the army and warships, and finally the civilians. Regardless of gender, age or status, as long as you are a Skrull, you will definitely die. Hiding, running away or resisting is useless. He spent 3 years in the universe, killing the Skrulls to complete extinction by himself. After that, no one dared to mention the idea of invading the Earth. After all, the Ancient One only beat you into submission, and Strange was negotiating terms. But Shenyan is different. He directly wants the lives of your entire family, the destruction of your country and race, and even the stone tablets engraved with the history of your race will be crushed into powder. More than one alien has said that he has seen a black-robed wizard release a search spell for the entire planet above the planet, and then countless red beams fell from the sky. Strange didn't think he had gone too far. When some ignorant aliens condemned him for harboring such an executioner, he just smiled faintly and retorted, "He didn't do that to you, please shut up. His temper is not as good as mine." In fact, it was the Skrulls' bad luck that they ran into the gun. At that time, due to the death of Ancient One, Shenyan was in a bad mood, and because of the death of Ancient One, almost all the races in the universe wanted to share a piece of the earth. If you don't hit hard and kill the chicken to scare the monkey, such things will never stop. After communicating with Strange, he simply did it to the extreme. Anyway, the Skrulls are not good people. Thinking of this, Strange picked up the teacup and took a sip, and began to continue to enjoy his hard-earned rest time. Then a phone call came. His long face twitched, and he reluctantly took out his phone and answered it. A young voice said anxiously, "You have to help me, Dr. Strange." "Oh my god, can't I take a break?" he thought desperately. It's really easy to get stuck in memories. Shenyan stood up and planned to go to class. By now, his preparations have basically been completed. Now he just needs to wait for the wizards on this planet to develop themselves, and they may also give him some surprises. Sometimes a person's research will lead to a dead end. Most of the spells are similar. When he reaches this point in the magic road, new ideas are always more precious than new spells. If he wants to go home, he must have a complete and reliable method to break the wall. Although this point has already been obtained, he even knows that the world barrier is self-aware, which is really shocking. Why doesn't the world barrier of their world stop their behavior? Shenyan couldn't figure it out, and could only look forward to going back one day. By tearing off half of his soul and merging it with the world barrier, the gods from outside the domain will no longer watch him. This was a risky move, but he eventually proved that it was feasible. The next step was to find his original world in the vast sea of stars. Shenyan could foresee in advance that this would be an extremely long time, but fortunately, he still had some ways to pass the time so that he would not lose his humanity. Moreover, this process was actually quite interesting. He smiled. Chapter 20 The Best Christmas Gift. December 15th, 3 days before the Christmas holiday. Harry, Ron and Hermione didn't pay much attention to this. They put all their energy into the exam tomorrow. Ron spent a week going to Shenyan every night for tutoring. After that, he finally caught up with some of his studies. At least he could understand Harry's notes. The three of them no longer went to the playground or the lake. They stayed in the library except for classes, reviewing the basic theory of magic compiled by the professor, wishing they could completely understand every punctuation mark. December 16th. The day finally arrived. The exam lasted only 1 hour and ended quickly. Ron let out a long breath after putting down his pen. As he exhaled, he seemed to have his bones pulled out of his body. He collapsed back on the chair, staring at the ceiling with his eyes blankly. "Oh my god, I can't believe I did it." Harry and Hermione were no better than him. The crazy study during this period had already exhausted the three of them physically and mentally. The two of them slumped in the chairs in the same position and exhaled. Hermione said, "If it weren't for the professor's help, you might really fail." Ron curled his lips. "You can eliminate the possibility." "I didn't expect the professor to be willing to take a week of free time to teach me the classes he had taken." Harry didn't say anything. She seemed to be thinking. Snape was practicing hard in front of the mirror. "If you don't mind, Christmas. If you don't mind, we can do Christmas if you don't mind." He suddenly sighed and found that he couldn't say it even if he practiced in front of the mirror. But what else could he do? The Christmas holiday was coming soon, and he didn't want Harry to go back to that place again. Snape simply sat down. On his desk was a book, Basic Spells, and his notebook, which was densely filled with notes. Most of them were about the connection between the soul and the body. This once dark and damp office has now become spacious and bright. The fireplace that had not been used for many years is now basically burning. Magic candles are lit on the wall, and the warm and bright light fills the room. Snape even hung a blue curtain behind him, which was bought by Harry for him. Knock, knock, knock. Someone knocked on the door of the office. He didn't know who would knock on his door at this time. "Come in." A red-haired girl walked in. It was Harry. Snape sat up straight immediately, and his expression unconsciously softened. Harry smiled a little embarrassedly, and she said carefully, "It's like this, Professor. I don't want to go back to my uncle's house for Christmas. Can I stay in school for Christmas?" "Of course, I mean, why not?" Snape replied immediately, and secretly decided to spend Christmas in school this year. In the past, he would choose to buy some wine at his home and get drunk, but this year he didn't need to. "And you don't actually need to discuss this with me, you just need to tell the prefect," Snape said. "But I think I still need to tell you. It's better this way, Professor." The girl's voice was filled with a bit of suppressed cheering, and then she left. Snape looked at the closed door and muttered to himself, "Wait a little longer. It will be done soon." Shenyan was grading the test papers. He did not use magic, but graded them by hand. This is a kind of respect. He had to do this, otherwise how could he be considered a qualified teacher? These students did not let him down, nor did they let themselves down. All passed, and Ron Weasley even got a good score of 97. After grading the test papers, Shenyan looked up at the clock on the wall. It was already 5 o'clock in the afternoon. He was not interested in these holidays, but he didn't plan to spend it in the office like this. He got up and put on a black robe, planning to go for a walk in the Forbidden Forest. A few days ago, he asked the eight-eyed giant spider to clean up its offspring. There are still many magical creatures in this world that he didn't expect. For example, those unicorns and centaurs. This made him a little curious. "Can I get a dragon to study?" Dumbledore told him that he could get one after Christmas. Shenyan walked along the way. There were many students on the road, but they all ignored him. Shenyan liked this little trick that could make him less noticeable. He walked into the dark Forbidden Forest. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, even in Britain, which is famous for its gloomy weather, there was still some afterglow of the sun in the sky. But after stepping into the Forbidden Forest, the sun disappeared completely. The trees here have few leaves, stretching out their bare twisted branches, winding towards the sky in the darkness, as if screaming. Shenyan walked all the way in. He would stop from time to time to look at the plants with magical auras, but his main purpose was to find a unicorn. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, his eyes had turned pure black. In his vision at this time, the world was simply divided into black and white. There were scarlet footprints on the ground, guiding him in a certain direction. The footprints spread all the way to the depths of the Forbidden Forest. He found a pure white creature at the bottom of a slope. It had a golden horn on its head and was pure white. It even emitted fluorescence in the dark. The white hair on its neck looked sacred and inviolable. Of course, it depended on the person. Just like now, Shenyan cancelled the little trick and showed up. The unicorn did not run away immediately. Instead, it slowly walked towards him with undisguised curiosity in its eyes. It slowly walked in front of Shenyan and lowered its head. Shenyan reached out and touched it, feeling a special warmth. It was like taking a hot spring bath. He laughed. "Do you think I'm in pain?" It stared at Shenyan with those eyes and rubbed his head against him. "Oh, don't be so." "I'm not in pain," he said, but the unicorn still didn't stop its behavior. The golden horn on its head was emitting golden light, trying to dispel the pain in Shenyan's heart. "No, you don't understand. This is not pain, but homesickness." His smile disappeared. He stroked the unicorn's head attentively and patiently, but he didn't look at it, but stared at the empty space beside him. "What is homesickness?" "It's hard to explain to you, because it's a human concept. Do you really want to know?" "Well, my literary attainments are very poor. I'll try my best to describe it to you," Shenyan said. "It's like a fish that is forced to leave the water. Although this fish has evolved in the process and can survive on land without water, it may not even be a fish anymore. But he still misses the bottom of the water. He misses his family, his friends. He misses every bit of that place, and if possible, he wants to see that place again before he dies." The unicorn stood quietly there, listening to him talk, and rubbed him again. "You want me to ride on you?" Shenyan was a little surprised, but the unicorn rubbed him again, as if urging him, so he had to get on the horse, and the unicorn took him to run in another direction. The unicorn took him all the way through the Forbidden Forest at a very fast speed and came to a lake. He dismounted, and the considerate creature nuzzled him again. Shenyan laughed. "No, number, I'm not a real fish. You brought me to the lake." His words stopped abruptly, because the unicorn was creating a spectacle for him with the glowing horn on its forehead. The lake began to boil, and countless fish jumped out of the water. A group of unicorns were slowly walking out on the other side of the river. Each of them had a horn on their head shining. The magic power surging from those flashing horns formed a mighty golden light curtain, illuminating the entire lake as bright as day, and even half of the sky was illuminated. In this warm golden light, the unicorn nuzzled him, and the lonely man lowered his head, put his head close to the unicorn, and whispered, "Thank you. This is the best Christmas gift I have ever received." The unicorn cried happily, stepped over the golden light curtain on the water, and joined its companions. The light slowly disappeared, and they gradually disappeared into the depths of the forbidden forest on the other side. Shenyan stood there for a long time. Chapter 21, The First Study of the Hungarian Horntail. On Christmas Day, Shenyan was not at Hogwarts. He knew that the teachers and students who stayed in the school would have a Christmas dinner together. The number of people might not be large, but the scene would definitely be large enough. However, he had some more urgent things to do at the moment. At least, it was much more urgent for him than the Christmas dinner. He was now in the Nordic plains, and Dumbledore got him a Hungarian horntail. The dragon was covered with black scales, yellow eyes, and bronze horns. The tail was full of spikes. This monster, known for its extreme ferocity, was lying on the ground obediently at this moment, not even daring to breathe. Its pair of yellow eyes did not even dare to look at Shenyan, but only dared to stare at the hem of his black robe. The man in a suit stretched out his hand, and Shenyan shook it with him. The man said enthusiastically, "Sir, I must say that I have never seen this dragon like this." "Really? Aren't you an expert in this business?" "Dumbledore said that you have sold more than 50 dragons in 20 years. Shenyan turned his head to look at the horntail and said casually, "Haha, that's just a sign. I did sell a lot of dragons, but I'm not an expert." The man laughed and then left using apparition. He was very tactful. Watching him leave, Shenyan casually set up 5 detection spells on the place, and a strong anti-magic. Then he set up a human dispersal spell. After doing all this, he even used the mirror space carefully. The dragon had been confused by the repeated magical aura. Dragons are naturally very sensitive to the breath of magic. Their tendons, hearts, and even scales are good materials for making various magical items. Shenyan saw from the history of magic that there are only 6 species of dragons left, all of which are endangered species, but the charm of money is endless. What's more, sometimes you don't need to spend money. Dumbledore just said it lightly, and the man came to the door and offered to provide a Hungarian horntail. He didn't ask for anything in return, he just wanted to make a familiar face. Most of these people are good at taking advantage of opportunities and changing their minds. It doesn't sound good, but most of them are doing well. Human society cannot lack such people, and no one will really hate them if you are the one they change their minds for. Shenyan looked at the dragon in front of him and was rarely in a dilemma. He wanted to study the dragon, but he didn't want it to die like this. He soon thought of a way. Black magic power surged between his fingers, and a mysterious magic circle emerged in the air. Shenyan used magic power to gather into a big hand and grabbed the dragon. The magic circle became larger, and then he lifted the dragon and made it pass through the magic circle. The tree wasp lowered its head after a moment and looked at its claws blankly. It was now more than twice as large, and its poor brain capacity could not understand this situation. It was only 7 meters long, but now it was 18 meters long. Shenyan disappeared on the spot and appeared above the tree wasp's head in the blink of an eye. He stamped his feet lightly, and the horntail's mountain-like body collapsed to the ground, and it fell into a deep sleep. Shenyan walked down, squatted down, and shielded the dragon from pain. His eyes moved to the bronze and ferocious horns on its head, thinking. Research log, Hogwarts World, classified creatures, subspecies dragon, Hungarian horntail. As his voice fell, a ball of light appeared out of thin air and said in an inorganic voice, "Start recording." "Well, let me see." After using the multiplication technique, the physique is comprehensively enhanced, and the possibility of reversion cannot be ruled out. He summoned a wind blade to chop at the scales of the horntail, easily scratching a deep scar on its back that could be seen to the bone. Shenyan frowned. The magic resistance is very low, and it is not clear whether other subspecies of dragons are the same. Note: remember to increase the magic resistance. Shenyan pinched it casually again, and a ball of fire ignited in the air. He threw it on its abdomen, and the burning lasted for several minutes. Under the high temperature, the scales on the horntail's abdomen did not even change color. Next, he roasted the whole body, and the scales didn't even change in temperature. Shenyan laughed and nodded. The fire is very high. He took some blood from the wound on the tree wasp's back, 2 large bottles, then he cast a spell, and a hymn sounded in the air, as if millions of voices were chanting together. They were men and women, old and young, chanting his holy name, and then said in unison, "Heal." In a golden light, the healing spell from heaven restored the wound on the tree wasp's back to its original state, and it even grew a little bigger, reaching 21 meters. Shenyan was a little surprised. This spell came from his world, but why can it be used in other worlds? Record: the tree wasp does not resist the spell from heaven, and can even enjoy the enhanced state. The possibility of being a sub-dragon species of hell can be ruled out. "Now, let me see your horn." He said so, and a green light shone in his hand. A huge 2-handed sword appeared in his hand. Shenyan, wearing a robe, swung a giant sword larger than others and cut off the horns of the tree wasp. Well, there is no blood flowing out of the broken part. The horn is not a vital part for the hornet. He moved his fingers and one horn flew up. He did what he did in Lavender's wand shop again, but this time he added a lot of special materials. Shenyan leaned on the cane and the other horn flew up. It disappeared in the air. He planned to take this back to Lavender to practice. I taught him a few tricks, so I have to give him some materials. Otherwise, if he messes up, it will be considered a blow to my reputation. Shenyan thought to himself that he always had a different persistence in these strange places. Next, let's try the magic conduction. He raised the cane. The cane was pitch black with spiral patterns on the body. It looked plain and simple, but in the next second, the end was lit up by magic power, and a beam of fire that penetrated the sky and the earth sprayed out, directly evaporating a mountain not far away, leaving no residue. If it weren't in the mirror space, this would probably drive all the wizards here crazy. The magic conductivity is very good. I began to doubt it. Are the dragons in every world like this? It's a miracle that they are not raised in groups. Of course, it may also be that these guys don't know the importance of sustainable development. The leeks have to be harvested in waves. Overall evaluation: it is an excellent miscellaneous soldier. After the multiplication technique, it should be able to fight 2 Steve Rogers. Sorry, Captain, I don't want to do this. How was your further study? Why am I talking to the recording ball about this? The horns and scales have very excellent magic conductivity. The fire resistance is very good, but the magic resistance is average. The light ball disappeared. He waved his hand, and the dragon opened his eyes and screamed miserably. But its voice was gradually becoming shrill, and so was its body. From a 21-meter behemoth, it gradually became the size of a palm. Shenyan walked up and grabbed the emotional little thing and played with it in his hand. The shrunken tree wasp bit him with its claws and teeth, but it couldn't even break the skin. It also tried fire, but could only spit out a puff of black smoke. Not long after, it lay flat on its own, giving up the struggle. It collapsed in Shenyan's palm, just like a dead lizard. Shenyan looked at the sky of northern Europe and said to himself, "There is not even a Chinese dragon. Oh, I still want to ride a dragon." He didn't know that something was about to happen. There must be an effect for every cause. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22 First Meditation. The holiday passed quickly, although it was not long at first. No matter what the holiday was like, it was always short in front of school. At the beginning of January, Hogwarts, which had been quiet for a few days, became noisy again. The students ended their Christmas holiday and returned to school. The next holiday would be Easter. Ron sat upright and waited for class. The seriousness with which he treated Professor He's class now really made Harry and Hermione feel that he had changed. He arrived 20 minutes early for every class, and after class he had to check his notes on the blackboard to see if there were any mistakes. He went to the dormitory, the canteen, the classroom, and the library. His two twin brothers said behind his back that there was another Percy in the family, but Ron pretended not to hear anything. Since he got 97 points in the exam, he felt his mother's unprecedented enthusiasm when he went home. During those days at home, he felt that he had everything he wanted. He used to be woken up by his mother in the morning, but now he slept until 11 o'clock and no one cared. His mother would even prepare hot meals for him thoughtfully. They were not leftovers, but were made separately, and there was a lot of them. He even ate beef until his lips blistered. Not to mention those Christmas gifts that are completely different. Oh, so this is the beauty of learning? Ron Weasley secretly decided that in order to keep such special treatment, he would work harder than before. At least better than Fred and George, always better than them. Back to the topic. Shenyan walked into the classroom on time at 9 o'clock in the morning. Not a minute more, not a second less. He looked around the classroom and suddenly smiled. How was everyone's Christmas? After getting a satisfactory answer, he pressed his hands down to signal the students to calm down. Then he said, "As I said before, after the Christmas vacation, we will start the first meditation training. I have taught you all the basic theoretical knowledge, and you have learned it very well, especially Mr. Ron Weasley, who ranked first in the last exam. Please applaud him." Ron listened to the applause with a red face, and Harry poked him with his elbow silently. Ron couldn't hold it anymore. He grinned and rubbed his ribs, and laughed at the same time. But Hermione was a little unhappy. "Of course, before we start meditating, I must remind you of the dangers of meditation, since you have to completely sink into your own soul to find the mysterious little palace. It is very easy to get lost in the process. I hope you don't practice secretly in private. We will open a new meditation training course in 3 days. There will be time for special training every Wednesday and Friday afternoon, so please don't practice privately." He paused and emphasized, "You won't die, but you will become a fool without mind. Understand? Your body is still alive, but your soul is lost." "Then, please ask Mr. Ron Weasley to come forward and demonstrate for us." Ron stood up nervously and walked to the podium. Shenyan took out a blanket from somewhere and put it on the ground, letting him sit cross-legged. There was a low laugh from the students, and Shenyan just looked in that direction calmly, and the laughter disappeared. He whispered to Ron, who was a little uneasy, "Don't be nervous, Mr. Weasley. Please follow my instructions. This process is very interesting. Relax, okay?" Ron nodded. Shenyan took out a bottle of potion from the podium and opened it. A fragrance wafted out. Ron's heart trembled. He knew that this was a potion to help calm the nerves. He quickly closed his eyes as taught in theory. Shenyan's voice seemed to come from the moon. "Imagine the place where you feel most at ease, no matter where it is." Ron's mind emerged his room, with his favorite posters of the Seeker on the wall and behind the door, some of which were already worn out. The wardrobe was yellow and always creaked. Although the floor was worn out, it was also very bright. There was a carpet under his bed. Ron opened his eyes and found that he was actually in his room at home. Everything was real and credible, but it was also filled with a vague sense of illusion. He felt his body getting lighter, and even began to float, with his head touching the ceiling. "Don't indulge, Mr. Weasley. You are here to find the truth, not to indulge in a comfortable and safe corner." Ron opened his eyes, and his floating body suddenly fell down. He smashed the floor, fell between the broken wooden boards, and fell straight into the endless darkness. His consciousness switched back and forth between wakefulness and sleepiness, and all kinds of vague scenes passed by quickly. He felt like he was in the sun, and his tongue was roasted with blisters. He felt like he was in the ocean, almost drowning, and there were huge monsters swimming beside him, until Shenyan's voice appeared again. "Wake up." He quickly pulled his head back from the bottom of his head, and the whole person seemed to have just been pulled out of the water, and his whole body was wet. The wet red hair hung in front of his forehead, and Hermione and Harry looked at him worriedly. A finger appeared in front of his eyes and shook, and he heard the professor ask with concern, "What time is it?" 1. He was still a little dazed. He raised 4 fingers again. "What is this?" 5. "Not bad. You didn't have any serious problems." Shenyan laughed. He pulled Ron up from the mat and asked, "How does it feel?" Don't be afraid to describe the problem. Everyone's meditation experience is different. Although you failed this time, you just need to say how you feel. "Well, I was in my room first, and then I started to float." "Professor," your voice appeared, "and I started to fall. The floor was broken by me, but it was dark below. I kept falling inside and saw some very strange things." As he narrated, Ron's face gradually became ruddy. He even asked impatiently, "Can I do it again, Professor?" "Of course." "Number, what are you thinking about, Mr. Weasley? There are so many people waiting here. Go back to your seat, have a good rest after class today, and eat some sweets to replenish your energy." Shenyan told him so, and Ron obediently returned to his seat. He sat there with a dazed look, still thinking about those crazy scenes in his mind, and didn't even hear Hermione and Harry's whispered questions. Shenyan then shouted, "Please ask Mr. Neville Longbottom to come forward." Neville walked up to the podium with a pale face, and Shenyan asked him to sit cross-legged. The fragrance of the potion gradually relaxed him. Shenyan said again, "Mr. Longbottom, please close your eyes and relax." "Okay." Neville did as he was told, and his consciousness gradually sank and sank, all the way to his home, the home where his father and mother were still conscious. Neville screamed and passed out. Shenyan frowned. He announced the end of the get out of class, and then hurried out the door with Neville in his arms, leaving the first-year wizards who were talking about it. "This is to make up for the 2 updates I owed yesterday, and I also ask for various votes." Chapter 23 Saving a Family. Neville was very light as a feather. This was not the weight a fat boy should have. Shenyan carried him through the corridor, his brows furrowed. Meditation is indeed dangerous, but this would never happen under normal circumstances. The child's performance only showed that he had been in very serious pain. He looked down at Neville. The poor child's face was as white as paper, but his expression was very calm. You could not see any uneasy tremors or pain, only calmness. At the same time, beads of sweat rolled down his forehead. This was a contradictory face. It also meant that he was in great danger. He went all the way to the school hospital on the 2nd floor, and before he entered the door, he shouted, "Madame Pomfrey, please help." The old but gentle face of the school doctor appeared behind the opened door. When she saw Neville in Shenyan's arms, her face suddenly became serious. Shenyan handed Neville, who was as light as a piece of paper, to her and said hurriedly, "Excuse me, but please don't use any treatment on him before I come back. This is a symptom of soul loss caused by meditation. He is very light now, so you need to hold him down with something heavy, okay? Don't be nervous, Madame Pomfrey, he will be fine." Madame Pomfrey's face turned pale. She was frightened by the abnormal weight just after she caught Neville. She nodded, and Shenyan immediately used the portal to leave. He came to Dumbledore's office in an instant. The old man was eating snacks. Seeing his expression, he realized that something bad had happened. Shenyan asked, "Do you know the student Neville Longbottom?" Dumbledore put down the strange-tasting beans in his hand and nodded. "I know. He is an unfortunate child." "Very good." Shenyan made a gesture and said, "He lost his soul during meditation, and there was a phenomenon of floating caused by the soul about to leave the body. You should know what this means." Dumbledore's face became serious. "Floating means that the meditator subconsciously believes that there is no place that can make them feel at ease. Therefore, the soul will float endlessly in the void to find that place. Very sad, right? But there are many such people. Some can still be saved, while others will never come back. Follow me." He stood up and opened a portal. Behind the door was a quiet ward. The two of them stepped through the portal, and Dumbledore lowered his voice, pointed to the man and woman on the 2 beds in the middle, and spoke with a complicated expression. "These are Neville's parents, Frank Longbottom and Alice Longbottom. They are the members of the Order of the Phoenix that I told you about. They were cursed with the Cruciatus curse during the war against Voldemort." He took off his glasses and looked at the 2 people sleeping quietly. "They have been crazy for many years. Neville's condition may be due to this. This is my fault." Shenyan seemed to be relieved. He turned to look at Dumbledore, who was immersed in sadness. "Don't indulge in the past too much. But don't forget it. Mistakes can be remedied." Dumbledore raised his head, and a ray of hope shone in his eyes, but Shenyan just waved his hand. "Neville should have family, right? His grandmother, Miss Augusta, is his guardian." "Very good. You take Miss Augusta to the school hospital first, and I will come later." Dumbledore did not ask why. He did it. Shenyan closed his eyes, and the space around him rearranged and reorganized. A huge but gentle magic burst out with him as the center, accurately sweeping over the poor couple. They knew nothing about it. Magic is not omnipotent, just like this kind of soul disorder and madness caused by the spell is not within the scope of magic treatment. But Shenyan is. He raised his right fist and clenched it, and the black magic lifted the two people gently. Then it drilled into their brains. Augusta Longbottom, whom Dumbledore knew, was a strict and bad-tempered person, but at this time she was very helpless. It was almost difficult to walk, and Dumbledore had to support her, and the two came all the way to the school hospital. Madame Pomfrey was tying Neville to the bed with green strapping so that he would not float. She was already sweating profusely in anxiety. For a doctor, nothing is more uncomfortable than seeing their patients in pain and being helpless. Seeing this, Augusta Longbottom let out a short cry. She fell to the ground, and Dumbledore had to use a calming spell on her to calm her down temporarily. Madame Pomfrey and Dumbledore put her on a bed together, right opposite her grandson Neville. He could do nothing about it, and could only hope that Shenyan would come back soon. 10 minutes later, a black portal opened in the school hospital. Dumbledore, who felt the fluctuation of magic, raised his head at the first time, and he saw Shenyan walking out with two anxious people. His eyes became moist in an instant, and he had to lower his head to cover them. They were Neville's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Longbottom. Mr. and Mrs. Longbottom looked at him. The situation was urgent, and they didn't have much time to reminisce. They just simply greeted each other. Shenyan took them to Neville's bed and said, "Please each of you give me a hand." "Okay." Alice Longbottom, whose hair was already gray, and her husband Frank Longbottom looked at each other and stretched out their hands. Shenyan held their outstretched hands and looked down at Neville. The black magic formed a huge shadow behind him, which made people feel horrible and relieved. He closed his eyes, his soul dived, and began to search for their son's lost soul with Alice and Frank in the void. Neville knew he was lost. He had seen this phenomenon in the professor's book and learned relevant knowledge in class. He felt sad, but not for himself, but for his grandmother. Grandma was a strict person and often scolded him, but every time after visiting his parents in the hospital, Neville would see his grandmother crying silently in the room alone. He thought, if I go crazy too, what will happen to my grandmother? Grandma undoubtedly loves him. There is no doubt about that, but he can't do anything. His soul floated aimlessly in the endless void. Here, he can see countless magnificent and magical scenes. He saw a cow grazing on a meadow, and the cow turned into an exploding star in the next moment. The light of the explosion reflected in his eyes and then disappeared. What was left was a silent darkness. He tried to speak, but could only hear his own echo. In the silence, a creature whispered something to him, but he couldn't understand what it meant. Then the creature left him and sent him out of here, gently and friendly. His soul came to a beach again, and a huge octopus stretched out its tentacles to grab him. He could see the suckers on the octopus's tentacles, and in each sucker there were countless happy faces, saying to him, "Join us and you will be happy here." Neville shrank back in fear. His soul did not need to abide by the laws of reality. Therefore, as soon as this thought came to him, a force took him back and flew away. The scene around him was colorful, and he even saw a huge purple butterfly flapping a storm in the void. But the octopus's tentacles seemed endless, still chasing him across thousands of magical scenes until he hit a warm chest. Then he heard the professor's voice, "Back off." The voice was like thunder, and black lightning swayed in the void. The octopus's tentacles were broken and disappeared. A shivering cry came from the void, fearful and uneasy. Neville turned around and saw his parents looking at him with tears in their eyes. Chapter 24 You Have to Give to Get. Dumbledore closed the door, leaving the space inside for the poor family. He rubbed his eyes and said to Madame Pomfrey, "Please go and rest." "Okay, Madame Pomfrey." "I believe they should need a lot of time." He turned to look at Shenyan again, said nothing, just patted his shoulder, and then left. He walked alone in the corridor, his back lonely, as if he remembered someone. Harry later learned the whole picture of this incident from the Daily Prophet. Photos of Neville, his parents and grandmother were printed on it, and the bold black font was still, "The couple who have been crazy for many years are finally cured." Ron and her finished reading the report while having dinner, and the two came to a conclusion: it must be the professor who helped. They believed it. The inference in the newspaper was that Dumbledore did it himself, saying that he had been full of guilt for the couple for many years, so he had been studying how to cure this kind of madness caused by the Cruciatus curse, and he went to cure them after the research results came out. However, Neville's parents said it was not Dumbledore, and they kept the name of this person secret. The report also said that Dumbledore just showed a mysterious smile. Harry's comment on this was, "This girl named Rita Skeeter is really annoying. It's okay to ask the headmaster, but she actually went to Neville's house to interview him." Ron dealt with the roast chicken in the bowl, and said, "Neville has not come to school for 3 days. His progress may fall behind again. We have to help him." "Of course, but what's wrong with Hermione recently?" Harry put the newspaper aside and took a big bowl of vanilla ice cream to eat. "I don't know. She hasn't even eaten much recently and has been staying in the library." Ron shrugged indifferently. Seeing his nonchalant look, Harry pretended not to know who he was delivering food to every night. However, Ron really didn't know who Harry was delivering vanilla ice cream to every night. "Then I'll go first." Harry stood up. She had already finished the big bowl of vanilla ice cream. Not only that, she even picked up another bowl and ran away. Ron thought that if she continued to eat like this, she might become very fat, but he didn't dare to say it out loud. Last week, Malfoy was cornered by Harry again because he kept staring at him. He even suspected that Malfoy was enjoying it. This was the 3rd time since the beginning of the semester, not counting the time on the train. "But it has nothing to do with me," Ron thought. He quickly finished the roast chicken in his bowl, took a bowl of mashed potatoes and French soup, and went to the library. He had a silly smile on his face on the way, and he didn't even notice it. "Professor, I brought you another ice cream." "Thank you, Ms. Potter." Snape nodded calmly and took the ice cream. After more than half a semester, he was finally able to face Harry calmly. But the next sentence from Harry almost made him fall off his chair. "Do you know my mother, Professor Snape?" Snape held the ice cream in his hand tightly so that it would not slip. He took a deep breath and asked, "Who told you this, Ms. Potter?" "No one told me, Professor. I guessed it." In a long and awkward silence, Harry kept staring at Snape with her green eyes, and Snape just lowered his head to deal with the ice cream. "Well, I do know your mother." He finally gave up the resistance. Harry smiled lightly. "But she just said, 'Okay, Professor, remember to rest early.'" Then she left. Only Snape was left sitting in the office like a dull puppet. He didn't understand what Harry meant, just like he didn't understand what Lily meant before. He sighed and finished the rest of the ice cream. He wiped his hands and picked up the notes placed aside and continued to study. There was always a flame in his heart that never disappeared, and this flame was gradually burning more and more vigorously. From ancient times to the present, people like him have been like this, hiding the flames in their hearts and not showing them to others. In the end, they either burn themselves to death or find a way to release them. For a period of time, Hogwarts was very peaceful. Neville returned soon, and he was no longer as timid as before, and he was completely a different person. Many professors were very pleased with this. Harry still brought ice cream to Snape every night, and so did Ron. In addition to bringing dinner to Hermione, he stayed in the library and gave her his notes, and the two studied together. Time passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye it was April 17th, which was Easter. Hogwarts would have a 2-week holiday on this day. Harry had nowhere to go, so Hermione invited her to spend the holiday with her. Their family planned to travel to Hawaii, and Harry was initially worried that Hermione's family would be unhappy about this, but Hermione's father, a dentist, welcomed her very warmly. The students had all left, and most of the teachers were the same. Now the only ones left in the school were the gamekeeper, Rubius Hagrid, and the administrator, Argus Filch. The two of them actually enjoyed their vacation, but they insisted on not leaving the school. Shenyan knew the reason. They had been studying with Professor McGonagall. Professor McGonagall was one of the few people who would never leave the school. She seemed to regard this place as her home. Apart from these three people, only Snape remained in the school. He basically did not leave his office in the past 2 weeks, and asked the elves of Hogwarts to bring him some food to his office. His beard grew again, and his hair gradually grew longer, but he no longer had the energy to pay attention to his appearance. He was devoted to research. Shenyan had never told them a lie. Meditation was difficult, studying spells was difficult, and the new way of cooking potions was even more difficult. But no matter how difficult it was not as difficult as the resurrection spell that Shenyan taught him personally. According to the classification in the basic spells, this was a 7th level spell that they could not touch at all. It was the highest level. Its name was very ordinary, just called resurrection. But the principle was not simple at all. Snape still remembered Shenyan's serious expression in the individual class that day, and remembered every word he said. This spell is my own invention. I combined the 5 resurrection spells of my predecessors and eliminated their shortcomings to invent this spell. I want to remind you that this spell is extremely dangerous and uncontrollable, because resurrecting life itself is dangerous. What you want to get, you have to pay for it. Yes, you have to pay for something. Snape muttered this sentence silently and continued to devote himself to research enthusiastically. Chapter 25 Resurrection. It was rainy and gloomy, as if the weather in Britain had always been like this. Many wizards thought that this was some kind of ancient and powerful magic, but the official answer was that it was due to the climate. On this gloomy day, a haggard man in black came to Godric's Hollow holding a large and heavy black umbrella. This is a small village and a semi-wizard settlement. There is a small square inches the center of the village, with moss on the stone bricks, and it is very quiet. In the center of the square is a building that looks like a war monument. There are several shops, a post office, a bar, and a small church. The stained glass shines like jewels across the square. The monument is enchanted. When wizards walk by, it will change. It is no longer an obelisk with names engraved on it, but a statue of 3 people, a man with messy hair and glasses, a woman with long hair, beautiful and kind face, and a baby girl sitting in her mother's arms. Severus Snape walked through the church. The stained glass gave people only a sense of foreboding in this weather, but he seemed unaffected. He made people feel more gloomy and ominous than the weather. He came alone to a cemetery behind the church. There was a narrow door at the entrance. Rows of tombstones stood on the light blue silver carpet, engraved with the surnames of ancient wizard families. The small cemetery had been haunted for many years, but with Snape's arrival, the old ghosts retreated into their own cemeteries and hid. Ghosts are always very sharp. He walked straight forward and passed through the tombstones. Snape had not been to this place for many years, but he still remembered the way. He would always remember it, never forget it. He stopped in front of a tombstone with James Potter engraved on it. Snape looked at the tombstone and felt unexpectedly calm in his heart. There was no hatred, no contempt, only calmness, as if he had let it go. Had he? Snape walked over. Next to James Potter's tombstone was Lily Potter's. The epitaphs of the two of them were the same. An old proverb, the last enemy to be eliminated is death. Snape's lips moved slightly, and he silently recited this sentence. Yes, the last enemy to be eliminated is death. Snape put down his umbrella and let the cold rain hit his face. It was still cold in Britain in April, especially on rainy days. He soon felt a chill in his heart. Snape took a deep breath and no longer hesitated. Magic flowed from his fingers and turned into a white shovel, digging up Lily Potter's grave. He soon saw the coffin. Snape's lips trembled. He couldn't tell whether it was because of the cold or for some other reason. Maybe he himself didn't know. If someone asked, he would probably say it was because of the cold. He let out a long, painful sigh. He jumped down the pit, and the mud and rain soaked his trouser legs. Snape personally touched the heavy and cold coffin and wiped off the dirt on it bit by bit with gentle movements. As he moved, a sentence engraved on the coffin also appeared. May love let you sleep. Her love for her daughter made her sleep, and now another unspoken and unknown love will wake her up from death. Snape clenched his fists and chanted a spell. Ancient spells from another world came out of his lips. They spanned millions of years, even across a world, and came to the coffin. As the spell was chanted, the coffin was opened out of thin air. Inside lay a corpse in a black dress that had long been rotten and almost turned into a skeleton. Snape remembered that day, October 31st, 1981, and now it was 1992. Snape didn't miss the past time. Once this magic started, it must not stop. He opened his arms and screamed in pain. The magic power of his whole body flowed out from his mouth, nose, ears and eyes, and a white light illuminated the small pit. The magic power floated in the air, forming a ball of light the size of a basketball. Snape fell to the ground weakly, and he was in a mess at this time. Cough, cough, cough. Snape coughed hard a few times. He covered his mouth, and drops of blood flowed out from between his fingers. For a while, he really thought he was dead, but he didn't. He couldn't die yet, at least not now. So, Snape put his hands together, climbed up with difficulty, and knelt on the ground. The blood in his palms began to boil. The magic light in the air gradually dispersed, forming a complex patterned magic circle around the deep pit, and Snape closed his eyes. Shenyan's voice rang in his ears. Images flashed before his eyes. The difficulty of this magic lies in love, Mr. Snape. In his office, Snape heard Shenyan say this. He didn't look at Snape, leaning back in his chair and staring at the ceiling, his tone vague. First, you have to endure the pain of death, because this magic involves alchemy, and the essence of alchemy is equivalent exchange. If you survive the pain of death, then you can proceed to the next step. It is also the most difficult step. Shenyan suddenly sat up, looked into his eyes, and said word by word, "Is your love really strong enough to wake the dead from their long sleep?" Snape didn't know the answer at that time, and now Snape, kneeling in the deep pit, also didn't know the answer. However, the fire in his heart was so strong that if he didn't release it, he would burn himself alive. So he just smiled faintly. He had never smiled like this before. The magic poured into Lily Potter's body. Her body, which had decayed to a skeleton, was quickly regaining its human form. Her red hair grew again, but she was still not breathing. Snape leaned on his knees and moved to the side of the coffin little by little. His clasped hands had never opened until now. He put his hands on the face of the woman in the coffin who seemed to be just sleeping. He opened his hands, and his boiling blood dripped. Snape's forehead bulged with blue veins. He roared from his throat. At this moment, a flash of lightning flashed in the sky, and the rumbling thunder foreshadowed the arrival of a rainstorm. She didn't move. Snape lowered his head. The rainstorm fell from the sky, washing away the mud and blood on his body, and also soaking him all over. He felt the coldness piercing his bones. But he didn't care at all. The rain intertwined and converged on his face, and finally dripped onto the ground. No one cared about the low cry of a man in the rainstorm. Here, only tombstones and corpses accompanied him. Only ghosts could be heard, but they would not appear until a hand gently touched his cheek. Snape was shocked. He didn't dare to look up, fearing that it was just his own fantasy. But that voice, the voice that appeared in his dreams for countless days and nights, slowly asked, "What's wrong with me, Severus?" Severus Snape raised his head and saw a red-haired woman in a black dress looking at him with confusion. In the rain, they looked at each other. No one spoke, only the sound of wind, rain and thunder dubbed this long-planned reunion. Snape had thousands of words to say, but when the words came to his lips, he only uttered a few sobs and vague words. He had imagined this day countless times and was willing to pay any price. But when this day really came, he found that he couldn't say anything. Only tears flowed. Please give me a ticket. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.